Nyla Beaumont stood in the bedroom doorway, black leather suitcase in hand, staring directly into the eyes of the man the entire underworld feared. Kingston Beaumont, crime lord, empire builder, untouchable king, had never begged anyone for anything in his life. Until now. His voice cracked. "Please don't leave me." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. For years she'd been invisible in their marriage, a beautiful ornament, a silent partner. Tonight, she finally found her voice. "You should have asked me to stay when I was still here. Follow this story to the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this journey travels." The chandeliers in the Beaumont estate dining room threw cold light across 12 faces that belonged to men who trafficked in violence like other people traded stocks. Neela sat at the far end of the table, champagne flute untouched, watching her husband conduct business with the emotional warmth of a bankruptcy hearing. Kingston Beaumont didn't look like a monster. That was the problem. 6'3", tailored Brioni suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, salt and pepper hair swept back from a face that photographers loved. He looked like he belonged in boardrooms, not body counts. The scar along his jawline, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was the only honest thing about his appearance. Tonight's guests were the usual collection of wolves in expensive clothing. Viktor Sokolov, who controlled shipping routes through the Black Sea. Marcus Chen, whose real estate empire laundered money faster than industrial washers. Antoine Moreau, the Paris connection who handled European distribution. All of them sitting around her dining table, eating her catered food, pretending they were legitimate businessmen discussing legitimate business. Nyla had stopped pretending years ago. She wore a midnight blue Valentino dress that hugged her frame like a second skin. Her dark hair pulled back in a twist that took 20 minutes to perfect. Everything about her appearance screamed wealth, sophistication, control. Inside, she felt like she was dissolving. "The shipment routes through Marseille need restructuring," Victor said, gesturing with his fork. "The new harbor master is asking questions." "Then we remove the harbor master," Kingston replied, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. Problem solved. Nyla set down her champagne flute. The soft clink of crystal against mahogany went unnoticed. "Perhaps we could—" she started. "Not now," Kingston said, not even looking up from his plate. The words hit her like a backhand. Victor continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The question is whether we replace him with someone cooperative, or simply create enough chaos that the position remains vacant for 6 months. The position we need filled is in customs, not harbor operations," Nyla said, her voice steady. She'd reviewed the shipping manifests last week while Kingston was in New York. She knew the weak points in their operation better than half the men at this table. "The harbor master is a distraction. The real vulnerability is Nyla." Kingston's voice carried the same tone he used with subordinates who'd disappointed him. "We're handling it." She felt every eye at the table slide toward her, then quickly away. The kind of secondhand embarrassment that comes from watching someone's humiliation in real time. Marcus Chen cleared his throat. "As I was saying about the Atlanta properties..." Nyla stood up. The chair scraped against hardwood. Now everyone was looking at her. "Excuse me," she said, her voice perfectly modulated. "I'm not feeling well." Kingston barely glanced at her. "Take something for it." She walked out of the dining room with her spine straight and her hands steady. Made it all the way to the master bathroom before the trembling started. The bathroom was larger than most studio apartments, all white marble and gold fixtures that probably cost more than a college education. Nyla gripped the edge of the sink and stared at her reflection. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect mask covering a woman who was suffocating. She'd been married to Kingston Beaumont for 7 years. She'd been lonely for 6 of them. The beginning had been different. God, it had been so different. She'd met Kingston at a charity auction in Atlanta, back when she was working as an event coordinator for high-end galas. He'd been magnetic then, dangerous in a way that felt exciting instead of exhausting. When he looked at her, she felt seen. When he touched her, electricity. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of private jets, midnight conversations, and the kind of passion that leaves bruises and doesn't apologize. He told her early on what he really did. Not the sanitized version, but the truth. The empire, the violence, the money that flowed through channels that would never appear on any legitimate ledger. She'd said yes anyway. Maybe that made her complicit. Maybe it made her stupid. At the time, it had felt like choosing life over safety. The wedding had been absurdly lavish. 300 guests, most of whom she'd never met, celebrating a union that looked perfect in photographs. And for a while, it had been good. Kingston had been attentive, present, interested in her thoughts and her days, and the small details that make a life shared instead of parallel. Then something shifted. She couldn't point to a specific moment when he started disappearing. It happened gradually, like watching someone slip underwater an inch at a time. The late meetings became later, the business trips became longer, the conversations became shorter until they eventually stopped altogether. Now Kingston came home like he was checking into a hotel. He acknowledged her presence the way you'd acknowledge staff. Polite, distant, transactional. They hadn't had a real conversation in months. They hadn't touched each other in longer. Nyla splashed cold water on her face, careful not to ruin her makeup. She could hear muffled voices from downstairs, the meeting continuing without her, as always. She thought about the woman she'd been before Kingston. Ambitious, creative, someone who built things instead of just existing inside them. Now she spent her days organizing charity events, hosting dinners for criminals, and pretending her life hadn't become a beautiful prison. When she returned downstairs an hour later, the guests were gone. Kingston stood in his study, pouring whiskey into a crystal tumbler, still wearing his suit jacket like armor. "We need to talk," Nyla said from the doorway. "Tomorrow." He didn't turn around. "I have calls with Tokyo in 20 minutes. "Kingston." "Tomorrow, Nyla." She stood there for a moment, watching him review documents on his desk as if she weren't even there. Then she turned and walked away. That night, lying in their king-size bed with 3 feet of empty space between them, Nyla made a decision. She was done. Not done in the way she'd been done before. The frustrated, resentful, waiting for things to change kind of done. Actually done. The kind of done that required action instead of hope. She waited until Kingston's breathing evened out into sleep. Then she slipped out of bed, grabbed her laptop, and went downstairs to the library. The house was silent except for the ambient hum of expensive climate control. Nyla curled up in one of the leather chairs and opened her computer. She started making a list. First, money. She had access to several accounts, but most of them were monitored. Kingston's people watched the finances like hawks watched field mice. Any large withdrawal would trigger immediate attention. She needed to be smarter than that. Second, location. Leaving Atlanta meant leaving the only city she'd known for the past decade, but staying anywhere within Kingston's sphere of influence was suicide. He had people everywhere, legitimate businesses that fronted illegal operations in every major city on the East Coast. Third, identity. Kingston had enemies, lots of them, which meant anyone associated with him needed protection, even if they were trying to escape. She couldn't just disappear without a plan to stay disappeared. Nyla spent 3 hours researching, planning, calculating. By the time dawn light started filtering through the library windows, she had the skeleton of an escape plan. It would take time. Months, probably. She'd need to move carefully, quietly, without tipping anyone off. But it was possible. She closed the laptop and went upstairs. Kingston was already gone, probably left before sunrise as usual. His side of the bed was cold. Nyla showered, dressed, and went downstairs to start her day. On the surface, everything looked exactly the same, but inside she'd already started leaving. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of calm. Nyla moved through her regular routine: morning workout, lunch with Kingston's business associates' wives, afternoon coordination for upcoming events, while simultaneously constructing an entirely separate life in the shadows. She opened a new bank account under her maiden name at a small credit union across town, started transferring small amounts, 200 here, 300 there, from her personal spending account. Amounts too small to trigger any automated alerts. She researched cities where Kingston had no operations: Portland, Denver, Austin. Places far enough away to matter, but not so obvious that they'd be the first places anyone would look. She contacted a lawyer who specialized in complicated divorces, paid cash for a consultation, learned about legal separation in ways that might actually stick, even when one party controlled enough power to make courts irrelevant. The hardest part was maintaining the mask, smiling at dinners, making small talk at charity functions, sleeping next to Kingston every night while knowing she was actively planning to vanish from his life forever. He noticed nothing. That hurt worse than the neglect. If he'd confronted her, if he'd shown even a flicker of awareness that something had changed, she might have wavered. But Kingston remained exactly who he'd become, present in body, absent in every way that mattered. Then, 5 weeks after that disastrous dinner, Nyla found the journal. She'd been looking for a document Kingston needed for a property transfer. He'd mentioned it was somewhere in his study, and since he was in Chicago for 3 days, she'd volunteered to find it. The study was Kingston's domain. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk that probably weighed more than a compact car. Everything organized with military precision. Nyla started with the filing cabinets, property deeds, business contracts, shipping manifests, all meticulously labeled. No sign of the document he needed. She moved to the desk drawers. The top ones held standard office supplies. The bottom drawer was locked. She almost left it alone, but something made her try the small key Kingston kept on his key ring, the one she'd seen him use occasionally but never asked about. The drawer opened. Inside was a leather journal, worn at the edges, filled with handwriting she recognized as Kingston's but younger, less controlled. Nyla should have closed it, should have put it back and pretended she'd never seen it. Instead, she sat down in Kingston's chair and started reading. The entries dated back 15 years, before they'd met, before Kingston had built the empire he now controlled. The writing was raw, unfiltered, nothing like the man she knew. They took everything. The money, the connections, the trust. Marcus said he was protecting the family, that we needed to consolidate after my father died. I believed him. I actually believed him. Found out today Marcus has been skimming for 3 years. Millions. Routed through offshore accounts I didn't even know existed. The legitimate businesses, the ones my father built with actual sweat, he's been bleeding them dry. Victor says Marcus is planning to have me killed. Says there's already a contract, says I should move first. I don't know who to trust anymore. Everyone who should have protected me is either dead or trying to kill me. Nyla turned pages, watching Kingston's emotional deterioration play out in real time. The entries became darker, more paranoid, more desperate. Did it tonight. Marcus is dead. Had to be done. Self-preservation isn't murder, right? That's what I keep telling myself. Took over his operations, his people, his connections. If I'm going to survive in this world, I need to be the one everyone fears instead of the one everyone tries to kill. Starting to understand why my father never talked about feelings. Emotions make you vulnerable. Vulnerability gets you killed. The final entries were the worst. Attended Marcus's funeral today. His wife looked destroyed. His kids looked lost. I did that. I took their father because he tried to take everything from me. I can't afford to care about anyone anymore. Caring is a weakness. Love is a liability. From now on, everything is business. I'm going to build something so powerful that no one will ever be able to hurt me again. And I'm going to do it alone. Nyla closed the journal with shaking hands. For 7 years, she'd watched Kingston operate as an emotional fortress. She'd assumed he'd always been this way, that coldness was his natural state. The journal revealed something different. Kingston hadn't been born cold. He'd been broken into it. The mentor who should have protected him after his father's death had betrayed him, had stolen from him, had tried to murder him. And Kingston had survived by killing first and shutting down second. The man she'd married was a carefully constructed defense mechanism designed to prevent anyone from ever hurting him again. Understanding him didn't erase the years of loneliness, didn't undo the neglect or the emotional abandonment, but it complicated everything. Nyla sat in Kingston's study for a long time, holding a journal that explained the man she'd been planning to leave. When she finally put it back in the drawer, her escape plan felt less certain. That uncertainty lasted exactly 4 days. Kingston returned from Chicago on a Tuesday afternoon. Nyla was in the kitchen, reviewing catering options for an upcoming fundraiser, when he walked in. "I need you to organize a dinner for Friday," he said, not bothering with hello. 8 guests, political donors. Make it impressive but not ostentatious. Senator Whitmore doesn't like obvious displays of wealth. Nyla looked up from her laptop. "This Friday? That's 3 days away. You've done it before." "Kingston, I have a doctor's appointment Friday afternoon." "Reschedule it." He was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear. "Marcus, yeah, I'm back. Tell Victor we're moving the timeline up." His voice faded as he disappeared into his study. Nyla stared at the space where he'd been standing. The doctor's appointment was her annual physical. She'd scheduled it 6 months ago, had mentioned it to Kingston 3 times over the past week, including last night before he left for Chicago. He'd forgotten. Or more likely, he'd never actually heard her in the first place. Something inside Nyla, something that had been cracking for months, finally shattered. She closed her laptop, walked upstairs to their bedroom, and pulled her suitcases out of the closet. For the next hour, she packed methodically. Not everything. That would be too obvious. Just enough to survive for a few weeks while she figured out the rest. Clothes, toiletries, documents, jewelry she could sell if necessary, her passport, the credit card attached to her personal account. She worked quietly, efficiently, without tears or drama. This wasn't an emotional breakdown. This was a woman making a practical decision. When she finished, she lined the suitcases up beside the bedroom door and went back downstairs. Kingston was still in his study, still on the phone. Neela walked past without knocking. She made herself dinner, ate it alone in the kitchen, cleaned up, went back upstairs. The suitcases sat exactly where she'd left them. She changed into comfortable clothes, pulled her hair back, and sat down in the chair by the window to wait. Kingston didn't emerge from his study until after midnight. She heard him climb the stairs, his footsteps heavy with exhaustion, heard him pause in the hallway, then his voice sharp with confusion. "Nyla?" She didn't answer. The bedroom door opened. Kingston stood in the doorway, still wearing his suit, tie loosened. His eyes moved from her face to the suitcases lined up by the door. "What's going on?" His voice had that edge it got when something in his carefully controlled world wasn't making sense. Nyla looked at him steadily. "I'm leaving you." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Kingston's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, anger, then something that looked almost like fear. "You're what?" "Leaving." Her voice stayed calm. "Tonight, right now." He stepped into the room. "Is this about the dinner? I'll hire someone else to organize it. You can keep your doctor's appointment." "It's not about the dinner." "Then what?" He stopped, looked at the suitcases again. "Nyla, you're not making sense. We can talk about whatever's bothering you." "We don't talk, Kingston. That's the entire problem." "So talk now. I'm listening." The absolute obliviousness in his voice was stunning. Nyla stood up. "Do you know when you last asked me how I was doing? Not as a greeting, but actually asking?" Kingston frowned. "I ask you all the time." "When?" "Just last week. You asked if I'd confirmed the catering for the Mitchell event. That's not the same thing." "Nyla, do you know what I did today, yesterday, this past month?" She kept her voice level. "Do you know what I think about, what I want, what I'm afraid of?" Kingston's jaw tightened. "You're upset. I understand. But walking out in the middle of the night is, I'm not upset." That was the strange part. She felt calm, clear. "I'm done. Done." He said it like the word didn't compute. "You don't just decide you're done with a marriage. I've been deciding for 6 months. You just never noticed." Kingston moved further into the room. For the first time in years, she saw genuine emotion on his face. "You can't leave. Watch me." "Nyla." His voice dropped. "Be reasonable. You live in this house. You have accounts, credit cards, security. I don't need your money. Everyone needs money. I need a husband. I have a wealthy stranger who occasionally shares my address." That landed. She saw it in his eyes. Kingston ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through. "What do you want from me? I've given you everything. Everything except yourself. I'm building an empire." "You've already built it." The first crack in her composure. "You've built an empire. You've accumulated more wealth than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. You've eliminated your enemies and terrified everyone else. You won, Kingston, and in the process, you forgot you had a wife." "I haven't forgotten." "You cut me off at dinner 5 weeks ago in front of a room full of criminals. You didn't apologize. You probably don't even remember doing it." His face suggested he didn't remember. "You forget my appointments. You forget our conversations. You forget I exist until you need me to play hostess for your business associates." Nyla picked up the first suitcase. "I'm tired of being invisible in my own marriage." Kingston moved between her and the door, not threatening, but blocking. You're not invisible. Then tell me something about me. Anything. What's my favorite book? What do I do on Tuesday afternoons? What have I been working on for the past 3 months? Silence. Nyla felt something that might have been vindication if it didn't hurt so much. You can't answer because you haven't asked, haven't paid attention, haven't cared enough to notice. That's not fair. I found your journal. Kingston went very still. What? The leather one. In your desk. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a property document you needed. I found it by accident. His face had gone carefully blank. You read it? Yes. That was private. I know. She set the suitcase down. I know what Marcus did to you. I know about the betrayal. I know why you built these walls. Kingston's hands had curled into fists at his sides. Then you understand. I understand why you stopped trusting people. I understand why you keep everyone at a distance. Nyla looked at him steadily. But understanding doesn't make it hurt less. You didn't just wall off your enemies, Kingston. You walled off your wife. I was protecting yourself. Not us. Not me. She picked up the suitcase again. And I can't live inside your fortress anymore. Kingston's voice went quiet. Dangerous. If this is about Marcus, it's about you. About the choice you made to survive by shutting down. About the fact that you're still making that choice every single day, even though the danger is gone. Nyla moved toward him. Marcus tried to kill you 15 years ago. I've been trying to love you for 7 years. One of us shouldn't feel like we're fighting the same battle. You're being dramatic. The dismissiveness in his tone was the final nail. Nyla picked up the second suitcase. Move. Nyla. Move, Kingston. He didn't. They stood there, two people who'd shared a bed for 7 years, staring at each other across a distance that had nothing to do with physical space. If you walk out that door, Kingston said, his voice low, you're making a mistake. The mistake was staying this long. I won't come after you. Good. Something flickered across his face. Is there someone else? The question was so absurd she almost laughed. Who would I have met? I spend every waking hour either alone in this house or attending events with your associates. The only people I talk to are caterers and security guards. Then why? Because I'm lonely. The words burst out. I'm lonely every single day. I wake up alone. I eat alone. I go to sleep alone. The only difference is that you're occasionally in the same room, making it worse because I can see exactly how little I matter to you. Kingston's mask cracked. Just for a second, she saw the man from the journal. Young, scared, hurt. Then it was gone. You matter to me, he said. Not enough. Nyla walked past him. He let her go this time. She made it to the bedroom door before his voice stopped her. Please don't leave me. The words were so quiet she almost didn't hear them. When she turned around, Kingston Beaumont, the man who commanded an empire built on violence and fear, looked completely lost. Give me a reason to stay, Nyla said. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Nyla felt something break inside her chest. That's what I thought. She walked out of the bedroom carrying 2 suitcases and 7 years of accumulated heartbreak. Behind her, Kingston stood frozen in the doorway, finally understanding that the most dangerous thing he'd ever faced wasn't a rival's gun or a business betrayal. It was watching the woman he loved walk away because he'd forgotten how to be human. Nyla made it 3 blocks before her hands started shaking so badly she had to pull over. The rental car she'd picked up 2 days ago sat idling in an empty grocery store parking lot at 2 in the morning. Through the windshield, Atlanta sprawled out in amber streetlights and dark windows, a city that suddenly felt both familiar and completely foreign. She gripped the steering wheel and forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The suitcases sat in the back seat like evidence. Her phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark, silent. She'd half expected Kingston to call, to text, to do something. Nothing. Maybe he really wasn't coming after her. Maybe 7 years of marriage could end with a woman walking out a door and a man standing in a doorway, both of them too damaged to fight for what they'd already lost. Nyla's phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. She grabbed it. Not Kingston. A text from Simone Cartwright, one of the wives she'd befriended in the strange ecosystem of criminal spouses trying to maintain normalcy. Are you okay? Kingston just called Marcus looking for you. So he was looking, just not looking directly. Nyla typed back, I'm fine. Need some space. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, he sounded rattled. Whatever you did, it worked. Neela deleted the message thread and turned off her phone. The apartment she'd rented under her maiden name was in Buckhead, far enough from the Beaumont estate to feel like breathing room, but close enough that she could retrieve the rest of her things if necessary. It was small, furnished, anonymous. The kind of place designed for people in transition. She dragged her suitcases up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, unlocked the door to a space that smelled like fresh paint and someone else's life. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette with appliances that looked like they'd been installed during the Clinton administration. It was perfect. Nyla locked the door, dropped her suitcases, and sat down on the floor with her back against the wall. Then she cried. Not pretty crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and animal. The kind that leaves you gasping and snotty and emptied out. She cried for the marriage she'd tried to save, for the woman she'd been before Kingston, for 7 years spent disappearing inside someone else's empire. When she finally stopped, dawn light was creeping through the cheap blinds. Nyla stood up, washed her face in the bathroom sink, and started unpacking. Survival first. Falling apart could wait. Kingston stood in his study, staring at the locked drawer that no longer held any secrets. She'd found the journal, read it, understood things about him he'd never intended anyone to understand. The violation should have made him angry. Instead, he felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with business vulnerabilities or security breaches. Nyla knew why he'd built the walls, and she'd left anyway. His phone rang. Marcus Chen. Did you find her? Kingston answered without preamble. No, but I have people checking hotels, her friends' places, family. Marcus paused. You want me to activate the full network? Kingston thought about what that meant. Surveillance on Nyla's accounts, tracking her movements, treating his wife like a fugitive. No, he said. Not yet. Boss, if she's... I said no. Kingston ended the call. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. Pulled up the security footage from their bedroom, watched Nyla pack her suitcases in real time, her movements calm and methodical. Watched himself enter the room, watched the conversation play out in silent film. The footage didn't have audio, but he didn't need it. He remembered every word. Give me a reason to stay. He'd stood there like an idiot, unable to form a single coherent thought. 7 years of marriage, and when it mattered most, he'd had nothing to say. Kingston closed the laptop and poured himself a drink. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Victor. Heard about Nyla. You need anything? The criminal underworld operated on information. Everyone already knew. By tomorrow, every rival family, every business associate, every low-level operator in his network would know that Kingston Beaumont couldn't even keep his own wife. The thought should have worried him. It didn't. The only thing that worried him was the empty space in his bed and the silence that felt different now that it was intentional. Nyla spent her first full day of freedom doing absurdly normal things. She went to a coffee shop and ordered a latte without worrying about whether she'd be recognized. She walked through a bookstore and bought 3 novels she'd wanted to read for months. She sat in a park and watched people live their ordinary lives, joggers, dog walkers, mothers with strollers, and felt the strange lightness of anonymity. No security detail, no schedule packed with obligations she hadn't chosen, no performance. It felt like breathing after years underwater. But by nightfall, the lightness started to curdle. She ordered takeout and ate it alone in her empty apartment, listening to the sounds of neighboring lives bleeding through thin walls. A couple arguing, a TV too loud, someone's bass-heavy music. Her phone stayed off. She'd charged it, held it in her hands, stared at the black screen. But turning it on meant facing whatever Kingston had or hadn't done. Meant confronting the reality that leaving might be permanent. Nyla set the phone on the kitchen counter and walked away. She took a shower in the apartment's cramped bathroom, where the water pressure was terrible and the temperature fluctuated wildly. It was nothing like the spa-quality setup at the estate. She loved it. When she finally climbed into the apartment's cheap mattress, wrapped in sheets that smelled like fabric softener instead of Italian cotton, Nyla expected to feel relief. Instead, she lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying the look on Kingston's face when she'd walked out. "Please don't leave me." The desperation in his voice had been real. She knew Kingston well enough to recognize when he was performing and when the mask slipped. That moment had been genuine. But one moment of vulnerability couldn't erase 6 years of neglect. Could it? Kingston didn't go to work the next day. That alone was newsworthy. Kingston Beaumont didn't miss work. He'd run meetings from hospital beds, conducted negotiations during funerals, sealed deals while bleeding from a bullet graze. But he couldn't face the office, couldn't face the questions in people's eyes, the careful avoidance of the subject everyone knew about. Instead, he stayed in the estate and did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He read his own journal. Sitting in his study with the leather-bound book open on his desk, Kingston confronted the man he'd been before he learned to stop feeling. "I don't know who to trust anymore. Emotions make you vulnerable. I'm going to do it alone." The entries read like a manual for self-destruction, page after page of a man systematically excising every human connection in pursuit of safety. And it had worked. He'd built an empire, eliminated threats, accumulated enough power that no one would ever dare betray him again. The cost was sitting in those pages too: relationships discarded, friendships ended, a marriage withering from neglect. Kingston closed the journal and looked at his phone. Still no messages from Nyla, no indication she planned to come back. He could find her. His network was extensive enough to locate anyone within a 100-mile radius in under 24 hours. He could show up at whatever hotel or friend's place she was staying at. Could demand she come home. That's what the old Kingston would have done, the one who solved problems through force and control. But Nyla had spent 7 years living with that man, and she'd left. Kingston stood up and walked to the window. The estate spread out below. Manicured gardens, guest house, pool, everything money could buy. All of it meaningless without the one person who'd made it feel like home. His phone buzzed. A text from Antoine in Paris. "How are you holding up?" Kingston didn't respond. Another text, this time from Victor. "If you need to talk, I'm here. Since when did Victor Sokolov care about feelings?" A third text from Marcus. "Found out where she's staying. Buckhead apartment. Want the address?" Kingston's thumb hovered over the screen. He could have the address, could show up, could force a conversation. Instead, he typed back, "No. Leave her alone." Marcus replied immediately. "You sure?" Kingston deleted the message thread and threw his phone across the room. On the third day, Nyla turned her phone back on. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, 3 voicemails. None from Kingston. The calls were from Simone, from 2 other wives, from her sister in Seattle who somehow already knew. The texts were variations on, "Are you okay?" and "Do you need anything?" and "Call me." The voicemails were worse. The first was from Simone. "Nyla, honey, everyone's worried. Kingston looks like hell. Just call me back, okay?" The second was from her sister. "I don't know what happened, but you can stay with me if you need to. No questions asked." The third was from Marcus Chen, which was unexpected and unsettling. "Mrs. Beaumont, I hope you're safe. Kingston asked me to find you, but he also asked me not to tell him where you are. I'm respecting that, but if you need anything, and I mean anything, call me directly." Nyla sat on her apartment floor, staring at her phone, trying to make sense of the fact that Kingston had looked for her but then told his people to stand down. That wasn't the Kingston she knew. The Kingston she knew didn't give up, didn't respect boundaries, didn't let anything he valued slip away without a fight. Maybe she'd never known him at all. Or maybe, and this thought was more dangerous, the man from the journal was still in there somewhere. She called Simone. "Oh, thank God!" Simone's relief was audible. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine. I'm safe." "Kingston's been..." Simone paused. "He's not handling this well. He'll survive." "Nyla, I've never seen him like this. He's not going to meetings, not taking calls. Marcus said he's just sitting in that house." Good, Nyla thought, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. "I need you to do something for me," Nyla said. I need you to tell Kingston I'm okay, but I'm not coming back. Not right now. Maybe not ever. Silence on the other end. Simone? Are you sure about this? Simone's voice was careful. I know Kingston's difficult. They're all difficult. But leaving for real, that's dangerous. He's not going to hurt me. I'm not talking about physical danger. Simone lowered her voice. I'm talking about what happens when you're on the outside. No protection. No resources. These men have enemies, Nyla. Serious ones. You think they'll care that you left? The thought had occurred to Nyla. Being married to Kingston came with layers of security she'd taken for granted. Armed guards, surveillance systems, the implicit threat that anyone who touched her would face consequences worse than death. Without that protection, she was just a woman with information about an empire built on criminal enterprise. I'll be careful, Nyla said. Careful isn't enough. Simone sighed. Look, I'll pass your message along, but please, at least meet with Kingston. Talk to him. Figure out if there's anything salvageable before you burn it all down. There's nothing to salvage. You sure about that? Nyla ended the call and sat in the silence of her apartment. She wasn't sure about anything. Kingston got the message through Simone an hour later. She's okay. She's safe. She's not coming back. 3 sentences that felt like bullets. He stood in the bedroom they'd shared, looking at the space where her suitcases had been lined up. The room still smelled like her perfume. Something expensive she ordered from Paris, subtle and clean. Kingston walked to her closet and opened it. Half her clothes were still there. She'd only taken enough for a few weeks, which meant either she planned to come back for the rest or she'd written them off as acceptable losses. He closed the closet and looked at the bed. They hadn't slept together, actually slept together, in over a year. Somewhere along the way, sex had become another transaction. Scheduled, mechanical, empty. He told himself they were both busy, that physical intimacy wasn't the most important thing in a marriage. The lie tasted worse in retrospect. Kingston's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Same number. Marcus. What? Kingston answered. We have a problem. Marcus sounded tense. Diego Navarro is asking questions about Nyla. Kingston went still. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest he knows she left. The kind that suggest he's interested in why. Diego Navarro ran operations in Miami. He'd been sniffing around Kingston's territory for 2 years, looking for weaknesses, waiting for an opening. A separated wife was exactly the kind of leverage Diego would exploit. What's he saying? Kingston asked. Nothing direct, just making noise, letting us know he's paying attention. Marcus paused. You want me to shut it down? Kingston thought about what that would mean. Escalation, threats, possibly violence. All of it would trace back to Nyla. Put extra security on her building, Kingston said. Don't make contact, just watch. Boss, do it, Marcus. After hanging up, Kingston stood in the empty bedroom and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not fear for himself. He'd stopped being afraid of death a long time ago. Fear for Nyla. Fear that his world, the violent, ruthless world he'd built, would reach out and hurt her because she'd made the mistake of loving him. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to her number. Diego Navarro is watching you. I have people keeping you safe, but you need to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Nyla had left to escape his world. Warning her about Diego would just drag her back in, would prove that even in leaving, she couldn't get away from him. Instead, Kingston called Marcus back. Double the security, he said. And I want eyes on Diego. If he makes any move toward Nyla, I want to know before it happens. Understood. Kingston ended the call and threw his phone on the bed. For 15 years, he'd built an empire designed to protect him from betrayal. Now that same empire was the thing that endangered the only person he'd ever actually loved. The irony wasn't lost on him. Nyla discovered the surveillance on day 5. She'd gone to a yoga class, something she used to do regularly before her life became an endless schedule of obligations. Walking back to her apartment, she noticed the black SUV parked across the street. It was too clean, too expensive, too obviously out of place in a neighborhood of beater cars and domestic sedans. When she walked past it, the driver didn't look at her, which meant he was definitely looking at her, Kingston's people. Nyla felt anger spike hot and immediate. She'd left to escape his control, and he'd put her under surveillance anyway. Typical. Even in separation, he couldn't respect her boundaries. She went straight to her apartment, grabbed her phone, and called Marcus Chen. "Mrs. Beaumont, tell Kingston to call off his dogs," she said. "I don't want security. I don't want surveillance. I want to be left alone." "With respect, ma'am, you need protection." "From what?" Marcus hesitated. "There are people interested in your situation." "What people?" "Diego Navarro, for one." The name meant nothing to her. "Who's that?" "Someone you don't want attention from." Marcus's voice was serious. "Kingston's not trying to control you. He's trying to keep you alive." "Then tell him to keep me alive from a distance I can't see." "That's not how protection works." "It is if you want me to tolerate it." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'll pass it along." Nyla hung up and looked out her window. The SUV was still there. She grabbed her keys and went downstairs. The driver rolled down his window as she approached. Young, clean-cut, the kind of generically handsome that screamed private security. "You can leave," Nyla said. "I'm not in danger." "Ma'am, I have orders." "I don't care about your orders. This is harassment." "Kingston Beaumont doesn't harass people, Mrs. Beaumont. He protects them." "I'm not his to protect anymore." The driver's expression didn't change. "That's between you and him. I'm just doing my job." Nyla wanted to scream, wanted to key the pristine paint job on the SUV, wanted to call Kingston and tell him exactly where he could shove his protection. Instead, she walked away. Back in her apartment, she paced the small living room and tried to figure out what she was actually angry about. The surveillance? Yes, but also the fact that Kingston was right. She did need protection. His world didn't stop being dangerous just because she'd left it. And the fact that he'd thought to keep her safe, even from a distance, even without contact, that complicated things. Her phone rang. Kingston. Nyla stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Call off your security," she said without preamble. "No." His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. "Kingston. Diego Navarro is asking about you. Until I know what he wants, you're under protection." "I don't know who that is." "Good. Let's keep it that way." "You don't get to make that decision. I left you. That means I'm not your responsibility." "You'll always be my responsibility." The certainty in his voice was infuriating. "That's not how divorce works." Silence. Then, "Are you divorcing me?" The question hung there, suddenly heavy. Nyla sat down on her cheap couch. "I don't know." "Then until you decide, you're still my wife, which means you're still under my protection." "I don't want to be under your protection. I want to be free." "You think those are mutually exclusive?" "With you, yes." She heard him take a breath. "Nyla, please. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I'm asking you to let me keep you safe, that's all. I won't contact you, won't try to force you back. Just let me make sure Diego doesn't hurt you." The please did something to her chest. "How long?" she asked. "As long as it takes." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Nyla closed her eyes. "Fine, but your people stay far enough back that I can pretend they're not there." "Done." "And Kingston?" "Yeah?" "This doesn't change anything. I'm still not coming back." The pause before he answered felt endless. "I know," he said quietly, then hung up. Nyla sat in her apartment and tried to figure out why she felt disappointed, instead of relieved. The next week passed in a strange stasis. Nyla continued her new routine: coffee shops, bookstores, yoga classes, while Kingston's security maintained their invisible perimeter. She rarely saw them, but she felt their presence, a constant reminder that leaving Kingston's world wasn't as simple as packing suitcases. She started looking for jobs. Nothing serious yet, just browsing openings. Event coordination, project management, things she'd done before Kingston. Most listings wanted recent experience. She had 7 years of organizing charity galas for criminal wives. Not exactly resume material. Meanwhile, her phone stayed mercifully quiet. No calls from Kingston, No texts. Just the occasional message from Simone or her sister checking in. The silence from Kingston was both relief and torment. On day 12, Nyla met Simone for coffee. They chose a place in Midtown, neutral territory far from both the estate and Nyla's new apartment. Simone arrived 10 minutes late, wearing dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "You look good," Simone said, hugging her. "Rested. I'm sleeping again." That says everything. Simone ordered a cappuccino and led them to a corner table. "So, 2 weeks. How's freedom treating you?" "Weird. Good weird, mostly." "But?" Nyla wrapped her hands around her mug. "It's quieter than I expected. Not the apartment. That's loud. My head. I thought I'd feel liberated. Mostly I just feel alone." "That's normal. You spent 7 years building your life around someone else's schedule." Simone took off her sunglasses. Her left eye was ringed with fading yellow, the ghost of a bruise. Nyla went still. "What happened?" "Nothing." Simone put the sunglasses back on. "Walked into a cabinet door." "Simone, Ishchin." "Don't." Her voice was sharp. "We're here to talk about you, not me." Nyla wanted to push, wanted to demand Simone tell her if Marcus had put that bruise there, but she recognized the wall going up. She'd built enough of them herself. "How's Kingston?" Nyla asked instead. "Honestly, I'm worried about him." Simone stirred her coffee. "Marcus says he's not handling business, just sitting in that house like a ghost. Antoine flew in from Paris yesterday trying to get him to focus. Nothing's working." "Good." "Is it?" Simone leaned forward. "Nyla, I get why you left. I do. But Kingston's spiraling affects more than just him. He's got operations across 3 continents. If he's not paying attention, people die. That's not my problem." "It is if you still love him." Nyla set down her mug. "Who said I still love him?" "You're here. You haven't filed for divorce. You're letting him protect you." Simone tilted her head. "If you were really done, you'd be gone. New city, new name, cutting all ties. Instead, you're 12 days in and having coffee with his associate's wife, asking how he's doing." "I asked to be polite." "You asked because you care." The truth of it stung. "Caring doesn't fix anything," Nyla said. "I cared for 6 years while he ignored me. Caring isn't enough." "Maybe not. But maybe it's a start." Simone finished her coffee. "Look, I'm not saying you should go back. God knows I understand wanting out. But if there's any part of you that thinks the marriage is worth fighting for, don't wait until it's too late." After Simone left, Nyla sat alone in the coffee shop and thought about bruises hidden under sunglasses and men who built empires on violence and women who loved them anyway. She thought about Kingston sitting in an empty house, finally feeling what she'd felt for years. And she thought about the journal, about the man who'd been broken so thoroughly he forgot how to be human. Nyla pulled out her phone. She typed, "Are you okay?" Stared at the message for 5 minutes, then deleted it. Kingston was in his study when Marcus showed up unannounced. "We need to talk," Marcus said, walking in without knocking. Kingston didn't look up from the paperwork he wasn't actually reading. "About?" "About the fact that you've missed 4 critical meetings, ignored 3 time-sensitive deals, and generally stopped giving a damn about the empire you spent 15 years building. I'm handling it. You're not handling anything. You're sitting in a dark room feeling sorry for yourself while our operations fall apart." That got Kingston's attention. "Nothing's falling apart. Diego's moving into our Miami territory. Antoine's dealing with customs issues in France that you should have handled 2 weeks ago. And this morning, I got word that Senator Whitmore is considering pulling his support because you didn't show up to the dinner you had Nyla organize before she left." Kingston set down the papers. "Get to the point. The point is you need to decide what you're doing. If you want to win Nyla back, fine. Do that. If you want to let her go, fine. Do that. But this middle ground where you're doing nothing except making sure she doesn't get killed, that's not sustainable. I'm protecting her. You're hiding." Marcus sat down across from him. "And I get it. You love her. She left. It hurts. But sitting here isn't going to bring her back, and it sure as hell isn't going to keep the empire from crumbling." Kingston looked at his oldest friend. Marcus had been there through everything. The betrayal, the violence, the building of the empire. If anyone had earned the right to call him out, it was Marcus. "What do you suggest?" Kingston asked. "Fight for her. She doesn't want me to fight for her." "Did you ask?" "She walked out carrying suitcases. That's a pretty clear message." Marcus shook his head. "You know what I see? A woman who spent 7 years begging for attention and finally gave up. A woman who left not because she stopped loving you, but because staying was killing her. You want her back? Prove you're worth coming back to. And if I can't, then let her go for real. Sign the divorce papers, move on, but stop this half-measure bullshit." After Marcus left, Kingston sat in his study and faced the truth he'd been avoiding. He could either fight for Nyla or let her go. Middle ground wasn't an option. He pulled out his phone and typed a message. "Can we talk? In person. Your choice of location. I'll come alone." His thumb hovered over send. Nyla was in the middle of a terrible reality show when her phone buzzed. Kingston's message appeared on screen. Her heart did something complicated. She read it 3 times. "Can we talk? In person. Your choice of location. I'll come alone. No demands, no assumptions. Just a request." Nyla's first instinct was to refuse. Talking meant opening doors she'd worked hard to close. Meant risking the fragile peace she'd built in her tiny apartment. But Simone's words echoed, "If there's any part of you that thinks the marriage is worth fighting for, don't wait until it's too late." Was it too late? Nyla typed back, "When?" Kingston's response was immediate. "Tomorrow. Whenever works for you." She thought about suggesting a public place, a restaurant, a park, somewhere with witnesses and exits. Instead, she typed, "My apartment, 2 p.m., then added, "In Kingston? Come alone means alone, no security in the building. Understood." Nyla set her phone down and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Tomorrow, she'd see her husband for the first time since walking out. Tomorrow, they'd have the conversation that would either save their marriage or end it. She wasn't ready. But then again, she'd never been ready for anything with Kingston Beaumont. The next afternoon, Kingston stood outside Nyla's apartment building at 1:58 p.m. He'd sent his security team away as promised, drove himself in a car that wasn't registered to him, dressed in jeans and a simple button-down instead of a suit. He wanted Nyla to see him as a man, not an empire. At exactly 2 p.m., he walked inside and climbed 3 flights of stairs to her door. He knocked. The wait felt eternal. Then the door opened and Nyla stood there in leggings and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back. No makeup, looking more real than he'd seen her in years. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They stood there awkwardly until Nyla stepped back. "Come in." Kingston entered the small apartment and tried not to show his shock. This was where she'd been living? This cramped space with thin walls and cheap furniture? "I know it's not the estate," Nyla said, reading his expression. "It's fine." He looked around. "It's cozy." "You're a terrible liar." That almost made him smile. "Yeah." Nyla gestured to the couch. "Sit. You want coffee or something?" "I'm good." They sat on opposite ends of the small couch, an ocean of space between them despite the cramped quarters. Kingston didn't know how to start. Apparently neither did Nyla. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you want to talk?" "Because Marcus is right. I've been sitting in that house doing nothing, waiting for you to come back or for time to make this hurt less. And neither of those things are happening. So this is about you moving on?" "No." Kingston turned to face her fully. "This is about me asking what I should have asked 2 weeks ago. What do you need from me?" Nyla blinked. "What?" "You walked out because I wasn't giving you what you needed. I'm asking what that is. What would make you consider coming back?" "Kingston. And before you say it's too late or nothing will change, just tell me what you need. Let me try." Nyla looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." She stood up, paced to the window, stared out at the parking lot. When she turned back, her eyes were wet. "I need you to be human," she said. "I need conversations that aren't about business. I need you to ask about my day and actually listen to the answer. I need you to touch me like you mean it,
instead of like I'm another transaction. I need to matter more than your empire. You do, E?
No, I don't. Not yet. Because you've spent 15 years building walls, and those walls are so high you can't see over them anymore. Nyla wrapped her arms around herself. Reading your journal helped me understand why you built them. But understanding doesn't change the fact that I can't live inside your fortress. Kingston stood up. What if I tear it down? You can't. What if I try? Kingston, you've been this person for 15 years. You don't just wake up one day and become someone different. I do if the alternative is losing you. The rawness in his voice made Nyla flinch. People don't change, she said quietly. They do if they want to badly enough. And you want to? Kingston closed the distance between them. Not touching, but close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. I read the journal after you left, he said. Really read it. Saw what I'd become written in my own handwriting. That man who shut down after Marcus betrayed him? He destroyed everything good in his life trying to protect himself, including you. So you understand? I understand that I have a choice. Keep being that man and lose the only person who ever made me feel human. Or change. Change isn't a decision, it's work. Then I'll work. Kingston's hands curled into fists at his sides, fighting the urge to reach for her. Therapy, communication, whatever it takes. I'll dismantle the walls brick by brick if that's what you need. Nyla looked at him for a long moment. Why now? Why not 5 years ago when I first started pulling away? The question hit like a punch. Because I didn't see it, Kingston said. I was so focused on threats outside the house that I missed the fact I was destroying us from the inside. You walking out was the first time I actually looked at what I'd become. So I had to almost destroy our marriage for you to pay attention? Yes. The admission cost him. And I hate that. I hate that you had to hurt that badly before I woke up. But I'm awake now, Nyla, and I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I can be better. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm scared. Of me? Of hoping. Of trying again and having you disappear back into that fortress. She wiped her eyes. I can't survive that twice. Kingston finally reached for her, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that felt foreign and necessary. Then don't survive it, he said. Make me survive without you. Tell me your conditions, your non-negotiables, the things I have to do or you walk again. And if I fail, I'll sign whatever papers you want and walk away. You mean that? Every word. Nyla closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite herself. I need weekly therapy, she said. Together. Individual sessions too. Done. I need you home for dinner at least 4 nights a week. And when you're home, you're actually home, not on your phone, not distracted. Done. I need to rebuild my own life. Career, friends, identity outside of being your wife. And you can't undermine that or make me feel guilty for it. I'll support it. And if you slide back, even once, into treating me like I'm invisible, I'm gone. No second chances. No negotiations. Kingston looked into her eyes. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about fixing things for a month and then falling back into old patterns. This is permanent change or permanent separation. I understand, he repeated, and I'm asking you to trust me enough to let me try. Nyla pulled back from his touch. I don't trust you. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Then I'll earn it back. She laughed, but it sounded broken. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's going to be hard and messy, and there will be days you hate me. Kingston's voice dropped. But I'm asking anyway. Come home. Let me prove I can be the man you need. And if Diego Navarro is still a threat, he is, which means you're safer with me than alone. But that's not why I'm asking you to come back. Then why? Kingston took a breath. Because I love you. And I know I did a shit job of showing it for the past 6 years, but that doesn't make it less true. I love you, Nyla. And I'm asking you to let me prove it. The words hung in the small apartment. Nyla looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability, fear, hope. She also saw the possibility of more heartbreak. I need time, she said finally. Kingston's face fell. How much time? I don't know. Weeks? Maybe longer. Nyla stepped back, putting space between them again.
You say you want to change, but words are easy. I need to see it. Therapy appointments kept. Actions matching promises. Proof that this isn't just panic over losing control. What can I do to show you I'm serious? Start therapy. Individual sessions. Work on whatever made you shut down in the first place. Nyla crossed her arms. And stop having me followed. I'll take my chances with Diego. Nyla, I mean it. If you want me to believe you respect my choices, start by respecting this one. Kingston looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded. Okay. Okay? I'll call off security, but if Diego makes a move, then I'll call you. But on my terms, not because I'm being watched. They stood in the small apartment, the future of their marriage hanging in the balance. Finally, Kingston moved toward the door. Can I call you? If you need to talk about therapy or Diego, yes. Otherwise, give me space. He nodded, reached for the door handle, stopped. Nyla? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up completely. She didn't respond. Wasn't sure she could without her voice breaking. Kingston left, and Nyla sank onto her couch, emotionally exhausted. She'd asked for proof of change. Time to see if Kingston Beaumont could deliver something more valuable than money or power. She'd asked for his humanity. And somewhere in her battered heart, she desperately hoped he'd find it. Kingston sat in Dr. Elena Volkov's office and tried to figure out how he'd ended up here. The space was deliberately neutral. Soft gray walls, abstract art that meant nothing, furniture designed for comfort without personality. Dr. Volkov herself was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that suggested she'd heard every lie and seen through every defense mechanism. So, she said, pen poised over her notepad, tell me why you're here. My wife left me. That's what brought you to therapy. I'm asking why you're here. What do you want from this process? Kingston shifted in his chair. The leather squeaked. I want to fix myself. For her? For both of us. Dr. Volkov tilted her head. Let's start with something simpler. When was the last time you felt genuinely happy? The question should have been easy. Instead, Kingston sat there trying to remember what happiness felt like. I don't know, he admitted. Years? Months? Years. Maybe 7 years ago, when Nyla and I were still new. What changed? Everything, Kingston thought. But what he said was, I got busy. Busy? Dr. Volkov wrote something down. Tell me about your work. I run multiple businesses across several continents. Legal businesses? Kingston met her eyes. Some. And the others? That's not relevant to my marriage, isn't it? She set down her pen. You're a man who operates outside legal boundaries. That requires a certain emotional distance, compartmentalization, the ability to make difficult decisions without being paralyzed by empathy or guilt. Those same traits that make you successful in your work would absolutely affect your personal relationships. Kingston said nothing. Let me ask you something else, Dr. Volkov continued. When your wife tried to talk to you about her needs, what did you feel? Annoyed, like she was interrupting important work. And now? Now I understand she was drowning and I wasn't even looking. But in the moment you felt annoyed. Why? Kingston thought about it. Because emotions felt like weakness. Vulnerability felt dangerous. Why dangerous? Because people use it against you. Who used it against you? And there it was. The question he'd been avoiding for 15 years. My father's business partner, Kingston said quietly. Marcus Reeves. After my father died, Marcus was supposed to help me run the family businesses. Instead, he embezzled millions and tried to have me killed when I found out. How old were you? 23. And you handled it how? Kingston's jaw tightened. I killed him first. Dr. Volkov didn't flinch. Self-defense? Preemptive self-preservation. And after that? After that, I made sure no one would ever be in a position to betray me again. I built an empire where I controlled everything, where emotions couldn't be weaponized because I didn't have any. Except you married Nyla. That was different. Was it? Or did you marry her while still maintaining those walls, expecting her to live inside your fortress without ever actually letting her in? Kingston felt something crack in his chest. I thought I was protecting her, he said. From what? From my world, from the violence, from the people who would use her to get to me. But you weren't protecting her from the most dangerous thing in her life, were you? Kingston looked at Dr. Volkov. You, she said simply. You weren't protecting her from you. The session lasted another 40 minutes. When Kingston walked out, he felt like he'd been emotionally gutted. He sat in his car in the parking lot and pulled out his phone. No messages from Nyla. He'd been seeing Dr. Volkov twice a week for 3 weeks now, and Nyla still hadn't contacted him. She'd said she needed time. He was giving it to her. It was killing him. Kingston drove back to the estate, which felt more like a mausoleum every day. He'd stopped hosting business meetings there. Couldn't stand the reminder of that dinner when he'd cut Nyla off in front of everyone. His phone rang. Marcus. We have a problem, Marcus said. What kind of problem? The Diego kind. He's moving product through our Miami routes, not asking permission, just doing it. Kingston felt the familiar coldness settle over him. Business. This he could handle. Set up a meeting. Boss, Diego doesn't do meetings. He does power plays. Then we play power. That means escalation, potentially violence. You sure you want to go there right now? Kingston thought about what Dr. Volkov had said about compartmentalization, about the person he became when operating in his world. What's the alternative, he asked. Let him have Miami. We've got enough territory. If we let him take Miami without a fight, every other operation will think we're weak. Maybe. Or maybe they'll think you're smart enough to choose your battles. Marcus paused. Look, I'm not saying go soft. I'm saying maybe now isn't the time for a war. Not while you're trying to fix things with Nyla. Kingston ended the call and sat in his car, staring at the estate. Marcus was right. Starting a war with Diego meant exactly the kind of emotional shutdown that had destroyed his marriage in the first place. But letting Diego walk over him meant looking weak. And weakness in his world got you killed. He was trapped between the man he'd been and the man he needed to become. Iki. Nyla sat across from her own therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, recommended by Simone, and tried to articulate why she still hadn't contacted Kingston. It's been 3 weeks, Dr. Chen said gently. He's been going to therapy, called off the security like you asked, respected your space. What's holding you back? I don't know if I believe it, Nyla said. Believe what? That he can actually change, that this isn't just temporary panic. What would convince you? That was the question, wasn't it? Nyla had asked Kingston to prove himself, but she hadn't defined what proof looked like. How long did someone need to maintain change before it became real? I guess I'm waiting to see if he slips, Nyla admitted. If the old Kingston comes back. That's not really giving him a fair chance, is it? If you're just waiting for him to fail. Is it unfair to protect myself? No. But there's a difference between protecting yourself and refusing to engage at all. Dr. Chen leaned forward. You asked him to change. He's changing. At some point, you have to decide if you're willing to meet him halfway. What if halfway isn't enough? Then you'll know. But right now, you're stuck in limbo. Not married, not divorced, not together, not really apart. That's not sustainable. Nyla knew she was right. She'd been living in this strange, suspended state for 3 weeks, going to yoga and bookstores in her tiny apartment, pretending she'd built a new life when really she was just hiding from the old one. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kingston. Dr. Volkov says I have attachment trauma and emotional avoidance patterns. Apparently I've been doing therapy wrong for 3 weeks. Starting over. Just wanted you to know I'm still trying. It was the first message he'd sent that wasn't about logistics or Diego Navarro. Nyla stared at it for a long time before typing back. That's good. Keep going. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, I miss you. Her chest tightened. She typed, I miss you too. Then deleted it. Then typed, thank you for telling me. Kingston's response came immediately. Can I see you? Just coffee. 30 minutes. I won't ask you to come back. Nyla looked at Dr. Chen, who was politely pretending not to watch her text. He wants to meet, Nyla said. Do you want to? Did she? The thought of seeing Kingston terrified her, but the thought of not seeing him felt worse. Yeah, Neela said quietly. I think I do.
They met at a coffee shop in Virginia Highland, neutral territory neither of them had history with. Kingston arrived first, wearing jeans and a plain black shirt instead of his usual suits. He looked tired, thinner, like he hadn't been sleeping. When Nyla walked in, something in his expression cracked open. "Hi," he said, standing. "Hi." They sat across from each other at a small table by the window. Nyla ordered a latte. Kingston ordered black coffee. "Thanks for meeting me," Kingston said. "You've been going to therapy." "Twice a week. It's brutal." "Good brutal or bad brutal?" "Both." He wrapped his hands around his cup. "Dr. Volkov doesn't let me hide. She calls me out on every defense mechanism, every deflection. It's exhausting." "But you're still going." "I told you I would." They sat in silence for a moment, then Neela said, "Tell me something you learned." Kingston took a breath. "I learned that I've been treating emotions like they're the enemy, that I built a fortress not just against threats but against feeling anything at all, and that fortress became my prison." "That's very therapy speak." "Yeah, well, I've had 3 weeks of it." He almost smiled. "But it's true. I thought shutting down after Marcus betrayed me was survival. Turns out it was just a slow death." Nela felt something loosen in her chest. "How's work?" "Complicated. Diego Navarro is pushing into our Miami territory. Marcus wants me to go to war. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to handle it without becoming the person who destroyed our marriage." "Is there?" "I don't know yet." The honesty startled her. The old Kingston would have had an answer, a plan, complete certainty. "What does Dr. Volkov say?" Nyla asked. "That I need to stop seeing every problem as a threat that requires total domination to solve. That maybe compromise isn't weakness." Kingston looked at her. "It's harder than it sounds." "I know." They talked for 45 minutes, not about their marriage, but about therapy, about the books Nyla had been reading, about Kingston's attempts to restructure his business operations to require less personal involvement. It felt almost normal, almost like the beginning, when they'd been able to talk about anything. When they finally stood to leave, Kingston walked her to her car. "Can we do this again?" he asked. "Coffee?" "Yeah, just talking. No pressure, no timelines, just this." Nyla looked at him. The afternoon sun caught the exhaustion in his face, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to maintain. "Yeah," she said, "we can do this again." Kingston's relief was visible. "Thank you." He didn't try to hug her, didn't push for more, just watched as she got in her car and drove away. Neela made it 2 blocks before pulling over, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She'd spent 3 weeks protecting herself, waiting for Kingston to fail. But seeing him trying, actually trying, visibly struggling, fighting against 15 years of emotional shutdown, it did something to her carefully constructed walls. She was starting to hope, and hope was terrifying. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Coffee dates twice a week. Brief texts sharing therapy insights or random observations. No talk of moving back in. No physical contact beyond occasional accidental hand brushes. It felt like dating, like learning each other again from scratch. Kingston told her about unpacking the Marcus betrayal in therapy, about realizing he'd spent 15 years punishing everyone in his life for one man's actions. Nyla told him about rebuilding her sense of self, about the job applications she'd started sending out, about the creative projects she'd abandoned after marrying him. Slowly, carefully, they started rebuilding something that looked like trust. Then Diego Navarro forced Kingston's hand. It happened on a Thursday. Nyla was at yoga when her phone started blowing up with texts from Simone. "Turn on the news, now." She grabbed her phone and pulled up a news site. The headline made her blood run cold. 3 dead in Miami. Warehouse shooting. Authorities suspect organized crime. Nyla's hands shook as she scrolled through the article. The warehouse belonged to one of Kingston's shell companies. The victims were his people. Diego had made his move. She called Kingston immediately. "I'm okay," he said before she could ask. "I wasn't there." "What happened?" Diego sent a message. He wants Miami, and he's willing to kill for it.
What are you going to do? Silence on the other end. Kingston? I don't know yet. His voice sounded strained. Marcus wants immediate retaliation. Antoine flew in from Paris. Everyone's pushing me to respond with force. And I'm trying to figure out if there's another way. He paused. Dr. Volkov says violence is my default because I've never learned other problem-solving tools. But this isn't therapy, Nyla. This is 3 dead bodies and a rival who won't stop until I'm dead or surrendering territory. Nyla closed her eyes. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to hear it from me instead of the news. After hanging up, Nyla sat in her car and faced the truth she'd been avoiding. Kingston could go to therapy every day for the rest of his life. Could work on his emotional availability and communication skills and vulnerability. But at the end of the day, he still operated in a world where violence was currency and compromise meant death. She'd fallen in love with a criminal, and criminals didn't retire just because their wives asked nicely. Kingston stood in his study with Marcus, Antoine, and Victor surrounding him. 3 of our people are dead, Marcus said. We can't let that go unanswered. Diego's expecting retaliation, Antoine added. He's probably already fortified his positions. We need to hit him hard and fast. Or, Victor said quietly, we give him Miami. Everyone turned to look at him. Explain, Kingston said. Miami's profitable, but it's not critical. We have operations in Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Paris, London. Losing Miami hurts, but it doesn't kill us. Victor leaned forward. Fighting Diego over it costs money, lives, and attention from law enforcement. Is it worth it? It makes us look weak, Marcus argued. It makes us look strategic, Victor countered, like we choose our battles instead of fighting everything. Kingston looked at the 3 men who'd helped him build his empire. They were waiting for him to decide, expecting him to default to violence because that's what he'd always done. But Dr. Volkov's words echoed. You see every problem as a threat that requires total domination. Maybe compromise isn't weakness. Set up a meeting with Diego, Kingston said. Marcus blinked. A meeting? Tell him I want to talk. Neutral location. We discuss terms. Boss, Diego doesn't negotiate. Then he doesn't negotiate. But I'm not starting a war without at least trying diplomacy first. After they left, Kingston sat alone in his study and pulled out his phone. He wanted to call Nyla, wanted to hear her voice, wanted to know if choosing conversation over violence was the right move. Instead, he texted, trying something different with the Diego situation. Hope it works. Her response came quickly. What are you trying? Talking instead of shooting. That's growth. Or suicide. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Kingston. Yeah? Be careful. Always. But careful wasn't always possible in his world. The meeting was set for Saturday night at a restaurant Diego owned in Buckhead. Neutral ground that wasn't neutral at all, but Kingston agreed anyway. He went alone, against everyone's advice, wore a suit because this was business, and business had rules even when it involved criminals. Diego Navarro was waiting at a table in the back. Mid-40s, silver hair, expensive watch. He looked like a banker, not a killer. Kingston Beaumont, Diego said, standing. Wasn't sure you'd actually show. Here I am. They sat. A waiter appeared with whiskey neither of them had ordered. So, Diego said after the waiter left, you wanted to talk. You killed 3 of my people. You were moving product through routes I'd already claimed. Those routes have been mine for 5 years. And now they're mine. Diego sipped his whiskey. You came here to accept that? Or to threaten me? Kingston fought every instinct telling him to flip the table and end this with violence. I came here to propose a deal, he said instead. Diego raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You want Miami? Fine, take it. But you stay out of my other territories, and we maintain a non-aggression pact. You don't move against me, I don't move against you. That's it? You're just giving me Miami? I'm choosing not to start a war over it. Diego leaned back in his chair. You know what they're going to say about you, right? That you went soft. That losing your wife broke you. Kingston's jaw tightened. Let them say it.
They'll see it as weakness, start pushing into your other territories. Maybe, or maybe they'll see it as strength, the confidence to walk away from a fight that doesn't serve me. Diego studied him for a long moment. You've changed. I'm trying to. Why? Because the person I was cost me everything that mattered. Kingston met his eyes. You have a family, Diego? Wife. 2 daughters. Then you understand. Something shifted in Diego's expression. Yeah, I understand. They hammered out terms over the next hour. Miami went to Diego. Kingston's other territories remained untouched. Both agreed to a 5-year non-aggression pact with clear consequences for violations. When they stood to leave, Diego extended his hand. You surprised me, Beaumont. I expected a bloodbath. There's been enough blood. Kingston walked out of the restaurant feeling like he'd either just made the smartest decision of his life or signed his own death warrant. He got in his car and called Nyla. How did it go? She answered immediately. I gave him Miami. Silence. You what? I sat down with Diego Navarro and negotiated a deal. He gets Miami. I keep everything else. No war. Kingston, that's... She stopped. That's actually smart. Marcus thinks I've lost my mind. Marcus isn't trying to save his marriage. Kingston felt something warm in his chest. No, he's not. Are you safe? For now. Diego agreed to the terms. Whether he honors them, Kingston shrugged, even though she couldn't see it. Time will tell. Can I see you tomorrow? Neela asked suddenly. Really? Yeah. Come to my apartment, noon. Okay. After hanging up, Kingston sat in his car and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. 8. Sunday at noon, Kingston knocked on Nyla's apartment door. She opened it wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down, no makeup. She looked beautiful. Hi, she said. Hi. She stepped back to let him in. The apartment looked more lived in than last time. Books on the coffee table, plants in the windows, signs of a life being built. I heard what you did with Diego, Nyla said, from Marcus. Is he still furious with me? He thinks you're crazy, but he also said it was brave. She gestured to the couch. Sit. Kingston sat. Nyla sat beside him, closer than she had at coffee shops. I've been thinking, she said, about us, about what I asked you to do. And I think I've been waiting for you to fail, watching for signs of the old Kingston, protecting myself instead of actually engaging with the work you've been doing. That's fair? I earned that skepticism. Maybe, but it's also not fair to ask you to change and then refuse to acknowledge when you do. Nyla turned to face him. You went to therapy. You called off security. You chose negotiation over violence even though everything in your world told you that was weakness. You're trying, Kingston, really trying. Does that mean I want to try too? She took his hand, the first intentional touch in 5 weeks. Not moving back in yet, not rushing into anything, but maybe dating, really dating, rebuilding this from the ground up. Kingston felt his throat tighten. I'd like that. Ground rules. We keep our own places for now. We have a standing date night every week where we don't talk about business. And we both keep going to therapy, together and separately. Done. All of it. Nyla smiled. Actually smiled. Okay then. They sat there holding hands in her tiny apartment, 2 people who'd destroyed their marriage and were trying to build something better from the ruins. Kingston lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me completely. Thank you for becoming someone I don't have to give up on. They ordered takeout and spent the afternoon on her couch talking, really talking, about Kingston's latest therapy breakthrough, about Nyla's job interviews, about what they wanted their future to look like if they could actually fix this. It felt fragile, tentative, like something that could shatter if they moved too fast. But it also felt possible. For the first time in years, their marriage felt possible. Mammak. The next 3 weeks were the best Kingston had experienced since the early days of their relationship. Date nights at restaurants where no one knew them. Long walks in parks, movies, museums. All the normal couple things they'd never done because Kingston had been too busy building an empire. They went to therapy together. Dr. Volkov pushed them hard, making them articulate needs and boundaries and resentments. It was brutal. It was necessary. And slowly something new started growing between them. Not the dangerous passion of their early relationship. Something steadier, more sustainable. Kingston restructured his business operations, delegating more to Marcus and Antoine. Started leaving work at the office instead of bringing it home. Actually learned how to be present. Nyla started a small interior design consulting business, leveraging the connections she'd made organizing events. Began building an identity separate from being Mrs. Kingston Beaumont. They were figuring it out. Then, on a Wednesday night, everything exploded. Kingston was at Nyla's apartment when his phone rang. An unknown number. "Don't answer it," Nyla said. "It's date night." But something in Kingston's gut told him to pick up. "Hello? Kingston Beaumont?" A woman's voice, professional, cold. "Who is this?" "Special Agent Jennifer Morrison, FBI. I need you to come in for questioning regarding your business operations in Miami." Kingston's blood went cold. "I'm not answering questions without my lawyer." "That's your right. But Mr. Beaumont, I strongly suggest you cooperate. We have evidence linking you to multiple federal crimes, and your cooperation could significantly affect how this plays out." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that comes from inside your organization. We'll be in touch with your lawyer." She hung up. Kingston sat there, phone still pressed to his ear, his mind racing. Someone had flipped. Someone inside his operation had given the FBI enough evidence to build a case. "What's wrong?" Nyla asked. "I need to call my lawyer." "Kingston, what happened?" He looked at her. "The FBI just contacted me. They have evidence. Someone talked." Nyla went pale. "Who?" "I don't know yet." He called his lawyer, Michael Rothstein, who'd been handling Kingston's legal affairs for a decade. "Don't say anything to anyone," Michael said immediately. "Don't go near your office. Don't talk to your associates. I'll set up a meeting with the FBI and find out what they have." "Michael, someone inside my organization flipped." "I know, which means you can't trust anyone right now. Lay low until I know more." After hanging up, Kingston sat on Nyla's couch trying to process what this meant. If the FBI had enough evidence to build a case, he was looking at years in federal prison. Everything he'd built, gone. Everything he'd been working toward with Nyla, destroyed. "Talk to me," Nyla said quietly. "If they have someone on the inside, they have everything. Financial records, operations, names." Kingston ran his hands through his hair. "I'm going to prison." "You don't know that?" "Yes, I do. The FBI doesn't make contact unless they have a solid case. Someone gave them enough to bury me." Nyla took his hand. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." "Nyla, if I go to prison, you need to walk away. File for divorce. Distance yourself completely." "No. This isn't negotiable. Neither is this." She gripped his hand tighter. "I didn't spend 5 weeks rebuilding trust with you just to abandon you when things get hard. We're in this together." Kingston felt something break and heal simultaneously in his chest. For 15 years, he'd operated alone, trusted no one, built walls to protect himself from betrayal. And now, facing the worst possible outcome, the person offering to stand beside him was the wife he'd nearly destroyed. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." They sat there in the small apartment, holding hands while Kingston's empire crumbled around them. The next morning, Kingston met with Michael at a secure location. "I met with the FBI," Michael said, his face grim. "They have recordings, financial documents, shipping manifests, everything." "Who flipped?" "They wouldn't say. But Kingston, this is bad. They're offering a deal. You cooperate fully, name everyone involved in your operations, and they'll recommend minimum security and reduced sentence." "What's the alternative?" "Trial. And if you lose, which you will, they have your entire operation documented. You're looking at 25 to 30 years in maximum security." Kingston felt the walls closing in. "How long do I have to decide, Meds?" he asked. 72 hours. After leaving the meeting, Kingston drove to the estate and walked through the empty rooms. This house, this empire, everything he'd sacrificed his marriage to build. And now it was coming apart because someone he'd trusted had betrayed him. History repeating itself. His phone rang. Marcus. "We need to talk," Marcus said. "In person. Now." They met at a warehouse Kingston owned on the outskirts of Atlanta. Marcus was already there, along with Antoine and Victor. "Tell me you didn't know about the FBI," Kingston said as soon as he walked in. "About what?" Marcus looked confused. Kingston studied his face. The confusion looked genuine. "Someone flipped, gave the FBI everything." All three men went pale. "Who?" Victor demanded. "They won't say, but they have recordings, documents, operations details." "That narrows it down," Antoine said. "Only a handful of people have access to everything." They looked at each other. The paranoia was immediate and viscous. "It's not me," Marcus said. "Or me," Victor added. "We need to find out who it was before—" Antoine stopped. "Before what? Before we're all arrested?" Kingston's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you want to know who betrayed you, check the restaurant security footage from your meeting with Diego." He showed the message to the others. "It's a trap," Marcus said immediately. "Maybe. Or maybe whoever sent this wants me to know the truth." Kingston called his security team and had them pull the footage from the restaurant. 20 minutes later, his phone rang. "Boss," his head of security said, "you need to see this." They pulled up the footage on a laptop. The video showed Kingston's meeting with Diego from multiple angles. But there was one angle that made Kingston's blood run cold, a booth 3 tables away from where he and Diego sat. Close enough to hear everything, and sitting in that booth, partially hidden but unmistakable, was someone Kingston recognized, Nyla, his wife. His Nyla, sitting in the restaurant during his meeting with Diego, listening to him confess to years of criminal activity. The timestamp showed she'd been there the entire time. Kingston felt his world shatter. "That's not—" Marcus started. "It's her." Kingston's voice sounded hollow. "Boss, there has to be an explanation. She was there, listening, recording everything I said." Kingston closed the laptop. "She's the one who flipped." The warehouse went silent. Kingston thought about the past 5 weeks, the coffee dates, the therapy, the slow rebuilding of trust. All of it a lie while Nyla gathered evidence to destroy him. She'd played him perfectly, used his desperation to win her back against him, let him confess everything in therapy, in private conversations, in that meeting with Diego that she'd somehow known about. The woman he loved had been working with the FBI the entire time, and he'd been too blinded by hope to see it. "What do you want us to do?" Victor asked quietly. Kingston thought about his options. He could run, could disappear into one of the offshore accounts and start over somewhere without extradition, or he could confront Nyla, demand to know why. His phone buzzed again, another text from the unknown number. "She's been working with the FBI for 6 months. Since before she left you. They approached her after the dinner where you humiliated her, offered her immunity and protection in exchange for evidence. 6 months. Everything that had happened, her leaving, the therapy, the careful rebuilding, all of it orchestrated. A long con to gather enough evidence to put him away forever." Kingston stood up. "I need to go." "Boss, wait." Marcus reached for him. Kingston shook him off and walked out of the warehouse. He got in his car and drove to Nyla's apartment. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Finally, the door opened. Nyla stood there in yoga pants and a t-shirt, her face registering shock when she saw his expression. "Kingston." He pushed past her into the apartment. "Was any of it real?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "The therapy? The coffee dates? The hand-holding?" Nyla's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the footage. You were at the restaurant when I met with Diego. You heard everything." She opened her mouth, closed it. "How long have you been working with the FBI, Nyla?" Tears started streaming down her face. "Let me explain." "How? Long?" 6 months, she whispered. The confirmation was worse than the suspicion. "So everything—" Kingston's voice broke. "Walking out, the therapy, all of it was a setup." "No. Don't lie to me." He slammed his fist against the wall. "You played me, used my desperation against me. Let me pour my heart out while you were building a case." It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Please enlighten me. Tell me how the woman I love spent 6 months destroying my life. Nyla was crying openly now. They approached me after that dinner, offered me a way out, protection, a new life. All I had to do was wear a wire and gather evidence. And you said yes. I said yes because I was drowning, because I'd spent 6 years being invisible in our marriage, and I finally saw a way to escape. She wiped her eyes. But then you started changing, and the therapy was real, Kingston. The conversations were real. Everything between us was real. Except you were still gathering evidence. I stopped. After we started rebuilding things, I told the FBI I was done, told them I couldn't do it anymore. But you'd already given them enough. Yes. Kingston laughed bitterly. So what now? They arrest me, you testify, I go to prison, and you get your immunity and fresh start? I'm not testifying. You don't have a choice. They'll subpoena you. Then I'll lie. I'll recant everything. Tell them I made it all up. That'll put you in prison too. Then we'll both go to prison. Nyla moved toward him. Kingston, I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. But I'm not letting them use me to destroy you. Not now. Not after everything we've rebuilt. Kingston looked at the woman he'd married. The woman he'd neglected. The woman who'd betrayed him. The woman who was now offering to commit perjury to protect him. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Get out, he said quietly. Kingston, get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. Nyla stood there, tears streaming down her face, and Kingston saw the exact moment she realized he meant it. She grabbed her keys and left her own apartment. Kingston stood alone in the space where they'd been rebuilding their marriage, surrounded by evidence of a woman's life, and felt something inside him die. She'd betrayed him, just like Marcus Reeves had 15 years ago. History hadn't just repeated itself. It had evolved, gotten more sophisticated, more personal. This time, the betrayal wore his wife's face. Kingston pulled out his phone and called Michael. I'll take the deal, he said. Full cooperation. I'll name everyone. Give them everything. Kingston, are you sure? Oh, I'm sure. Set it up. If he was going down, he'd do it on his own terms. Not because Nyla's evidence destroyed him, but because he chose to end this himself. Kingston walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the woman he loved and the last shreds of hope that anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of their marriage. Behind him, in the parking lot, Nyla sat in her car and watched him drive away. She pulled out her phone and called a number she'd hoped never to use again. Agent Morrison, she said when the FBI agent answered. I need to talk to you about my testimony. There's something you need to know. Because if Kingston was going down, Nyla was going to make damn sure she went down with him. She'd betrayed him once. She wouldn't do it twice, even if it cost her everything. Agent Jennifer Morrison sat across from Nyla in a windowless FBI interrogation room that smelled like burnt coffee and institutional despair. Let me make sure I understand, Morrison said, her voice flat. You're recanting your testimony. Yes. All of it. Every word. Morrison leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Beaumont, you spent 6 months gathering evidence against your husband. You wore a wire. You recorded conversations. You provided financial documents that took us months to track down on our own. And now you're telling me it was all fabricated? I was emotional, angry. I wanted to hurt him. Nyla kept her voice steady even though her hands were shaking in her lap. None of it was true. The recordings don't lie. The recordings are out of context. You heard what you wanted to hear. Morrison pulled out a folder and opened it. Let's talk about the meeting between your husband and Diego Navarro. You were there. We have footage of you sitting 3 tables away, listening to everything. I was following him, trying to figure out if he was having an affair. That's your story? That's the truth. Mrs. Beaumont. Morrison's patience was visibly fraying. If you commit perjury, you'll go to prison. Your immunity deal only protects you if you testify truthfully. Then I guess I'm going to prison. Morrison slammed the folder shut. Why are you doing this? We offered you a way out, a clean break, a new life. You were ready to testify 2 days ago. I changed my mind. People don't just change their minds about putting away their criminal husband. I did. Morrison studied her for a long moment. He got to you, didn't he?
threatened you, or threatened someone you love. No one threatened me. Then what? You suddenly remembered you love him after 6 months of gathering evidence to destroy him? Nyla met the agent's eyes. I never stopped loving him. That was the problem. Morrison stood up, frustration radiating off her in waves. Fine. You want to go down with him? That's your choice. But understand something. Without your testimony, we still have enough to prosecute. The recordings stand on their own. The documents speak for themselves. All you're doing is ensuring you go to prison too. I understand. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're throwing your life away for a man who spent 6 years treating you like furniture. From where you're sitting, you don't know him at all. Morrison walked to the door, then turned back. We're filing charges against your husband tomorrow morning. Federal racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. He's looking at 25 years minimum. You're sure you want to tie yourself to that sinking ship? Nyla's voice didn't waver. Completely sure. After Morrison left, Nyla sat alone in the interrogation room and tried not to think about what she'd just done. She'd torpedoed her immunity deal, made herself an accomplice instead of a witness, ensured that when Kingston went down, she'd go with him. And for what? A man who'd looked at her with such hatred last night she'd barely recognized him. A man who'd told her to get out and probably never wanted to see her again. But he was still her husband, still the man who'd spent 3 months in therapy trying to become someone worthy of her. Still the person who'd chosen negotiation over violence because he was trying to be better. She couldn't let the FBI use her to destroy him, even if he hated her forever, even if this cost her everything. Nyla pulled out her phone and called the one person who might understand. Simone, she said when her friend answered, I need help. Aunt. Kingston sat in Michael Rothstein's office, signing documents that would dismantle his entire empire. This is the cooperation agreement, Michael said, sliding another paper across the desk. You're agreeing to provide full disclosure of all criminal operations, name every person involved, and testify if necessary. Kingston signed without reading. You're also agreeing to asset forfeiture. The estate, the offshore accounts, the legitimate businesses, everything gets seized. Another signature. Kingston. Michael's voice softened. Are you sure about this? Once you sign, there's no going back. I'm sure. The FBI is offering 10 years with good behavior instead of 25, but that's contingent on full cooperation. If you hold anything back, I won't hold anything back. Kingston set down the pen. I'm giving them everything. What about your people? Marcus, Antoine, Victor, you're putting them all in prison. They knew the risks. Michael studied him. This isn't about cooperation, is it? This is about control. You'd rather dismantle everything yourself than let someone else do it. Kingston didn't answer. What about Nyla? Michael asked. The name was a knife between his ribs. What about her? She came in this morning, recanted her testimony, told the FBI everything she gave them was fabricated. Kingston went very still. She what? Torpedoed her immunity deal, made herself an accessory. She's going to prison, Kingston. Why would she do that? I think you know why. Kingston stood up and walked to the window. 11 floors below, Atlanta sprawled out in afternoon sun, oblivious to the empire collapsing inside this office. She betrayed me, Kingston said quietly, and now she's sacrificing herself to protect you. Doesn't that count for something? It doesn't change what she did. Maybe not. But it changes what she's doing now. Michael came to stand beside him. Look, I've known you for 10 years. I've watched you build this empire, make impossible decisions, survive things that would have killed other men, but I've never seen you like this. Like what? Broken. Completely broken. Michael put a hand on Kingston's shoulder. The FBI wants you to testify against your wife. Confirm that her recordings are authentic, her testimony truthful. If you do that, she goes to prison and you get a reduced sentence. I'm not testifying against her. Even after what she did? Kingston thought about Nyla sitting in that restaurant booth, recording him, gathering evidence, spending months building a case while pretending to rebuild their marriage. Then he thought about her recanting everything, destroying her immunity deal, choosing prison over betraying him again. No, Kingston said, I'm not testifying against her. Then you're both going to prison. Fine, Michael sighed. You're a stubborn bastard, you know that? I've been told.
After leaving Michael's office, Kingston drove aimlessly through Atlanta. He should have been planning his next move, figuring out how to minimize damage, protecting the people who'd helped him build his empire. Instead, all he could think about was Nyla. She'd betrayed him, but she'd also tried to undo it. She'd destroyed his empire, but she'd also destroyed herself trying to protect him. What the hell was he supposed to do with that? His phone rang. Marcus. "We need to meet," Marcus said. "All of us. Tonight." "Why?" "Because you're about to hand the FBI everyone's head on a platter, and we deserve a chance to speak our piece before you do it." Kingston wanted to refuse, wanted to avoid the confrontation, but Marcus was right. The men who'd built this empire with him deserved to look him in the eye before he tore it all down. "Where?" Kingston asked. "The warehouse. Midnight." Us. Nyla sat in Simone's living room, drinking tea that had gone cold an hour ago. "He's going to hate you forever," Simone said gently. "I know. And you're still going to prison." "I know that too." "Then why do this? Why not just testify, take your immunity, and disappear?" Nyla set down her teacup. "Because 6 months ago, I made a choice out of anger and desperation. I let the FBI use me to destroy the man I love. I can't undo that, but I can refuse to finish what I started." "Even if it means prison?" "Especially if it means prison. At least that's honest." Nyla looked at her friend. "I spent 7 years living a lie, pretending our marriage was fine when it was dying. Then I spent 6 months living another lie, gathering evidence while pretending I hadn't given up. I'm done with lies." Simone reached across and took her hand. "Marcus will never forgive this. He's already talking about Kingston bringing everyone down." "I know. They're meeting tonight, all of them. I don't know what they're planning, but it won't be good." Nyla's stomach tightened. "Where?" "I don't know. Marcus wouldn't tell me." Simone hesitated. "Nyla, these men are dangerous. If they think Kingston's about to betray them, they'll kill him. Or worse." Nyla stood up. "I need to warn him. He won't listen to you." "I have to try." She pulled out her phone and called Kingston. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. She called Marcus, Victor, Antoine. Every number she had connected to Kingston's operation. Nothing. "They've gone dark," Simone said quietly. "Whatever they're planning, they don't want interference." Nyla grabbed her car keys. "Where's the warehouse Marcus uses for meetings?" "You can't go there." "Where, Simone?" Simone gave her the address, then grabbed her arm. "If you do this, you're walking into a room full of men who think you destroyed their lives. They won't care that you recanted. They'll only care that you're the reason everything's falling apart." "I don't care." "You should. These aren't the men you met at charity dinners. These are the men who bury bodies." Nyla pulled free. "Then maybe I'll finally see the world Kingston's been protecting me from." She drove across Atlanta with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The warehouse was in an industrial area south of downtown, surrounded by abandoned buildings and broken streetlights. When she pulled up, she saw 5 cars parked outside. Kingston's, Marcus's, Victor's, Antoine's, and one she didn't recognize. Nyla sat in her car for a moment, trying to find courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Then she got out and walked toward the warehouse. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped into darkness, broken only by harsh fluorescent lights in the center of the massive space. 5 men stood in a circle beneath those lights. Kingston, Marcus, Victor, Antoine, and Diego Navarro. They all turned when she entered. "Nyla?" Kingston's voice carried shock and something that might have been fear. "What are you doing here? Stopping you from getting killed." Marcus laughed, but it sounded harsh. "Little late for that, Mrs. Beaumont. You already destroyed us." "I recanted my testimony. That doesn't unfuck what you did." Marcus took a step toward her. "You wore a wire, recorded private conversations, handed the FBI enough evidence to put us all away for life." "I know." "And now you think showing up here makes it right?" "No. I think showing up here keeps Kingston from making a mistake he can't undo." "The mistake's already made," Victor said coldly. He signed cooperation agreements this afternoon. He's giving the FBI everything. Nyla looked at Kingston. Is that true? His face was unreadable. Yes. Why? Because someone taught me that you can't build anything real on lies and violence. Someone showed me there's another way. Kingston's voice was bitter. Turns out that someone was lying the whole time. The accusation hit like a physical blow.
I wasn't lying about us, Nyla said. The therapy was real. The rebuilding was real. Everything between us was real. Except the part where you were gathering evidence to put me in prison. I stopped. When? After you got what you needed? After you had enough to destroy everything I built? After I fell in love with you again? The words burst out of her. I stopped when I realized the man I was betraying was becoming the man I'd always needed him to be. The warehouse went silent. Diego Navarro, who'd been watching this domestic drama unfold, cleared his throat. As touching as this is, we have business to discuss. Kingston turned to him. There's no business. I'm cooperating with the FBI. The deal I made with you is void. That's not how deals work in our world, Diego said. You made an agreement, shook my hand, gave your word. You don't get to walk that back because your personal life imploded. Watch me. Diego's expression hardened. You renege on our agreement, and I have no choice but to respond, violently. Then respond. I'm already going to prison. What else can you take from me? Diego smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Nyla. Her. Kingston moved between Diego and Nyla so fast it seemed instinctive. Don't even think about it. Why not? Your cooperation with the FBI affects me, too. My operations, my people. If you're going down, you're taking me with you. Diego shrugged. Fair's fair. Touch her, and I'll kill you before the FBI can arrest me. Kingston. Marcus's voice cut through the tension. We need to talk, privately. Kingston didn't move, didn't take his eyes off Diego. Now, Marcus said. Finally, Kingston allowed Marcus to pull him aside. Antoine and Victor followed, leaving Nyla alone with Diego Navarro. You really did a number on him, Diego said conversationally. I've known Kingston Beaumont for 5 years, never seen him rattled. But you destroyed him without firing a single shot. I didn't mean to get it. Doesn't matter. Intentions don't change outcomes. Diego studied her. You know what's interesting? He's willing to go to prison to protect you, after everything you did. That's either love or stupidity. It's both. Diego almost smiled. Fair enough. Across the warehouse, Kingston and his men were arguing in voices too low to hear. But the body language was clear. Marcus was furious. Victor looked resigned. Antoine kept gesturing violently. And Kingston looked like a man who'd already given up. Finally, they broke apart and walked back. We've reached a decision, Marcus said. Which is? Diego asked. Kingston withdraws his cooperation agreement, refuses to testify, takes whatever sentence the FBI gives him without dragging anyone else down. And in return? Diego prompted. In return, you honor our original deal. Miami is yours. You stay out of our other territories, and you leave Nyla alone. Diego considered this. What about the FBI? They have evidence. They'll prosecute regardless. Let them prosecute. But they won't have Kingston's testimony, won't have insider confirmation, makes their case significantly weaker. And Mrs. Beaumont? She recanted her testimony, but they can still use the recordings. The recordings alone aren't enough without context, Marcus said. Her recanting creates reasonable doubt. Without Kingston's cooperation, their case falls apart. Nyla looked at Kingston. You're withdrawing your cooperation? Yes. Why? Because Marcus is right. I was about to tear down everyone who ever trusted me just because I was angry. That's not strength. That's vengeance. Kingston finally met her eyes. And I've spent enough of my life making decisions out of anger. So what happens now? Nyla asked. Now we all go home and wait for the FBI to make their move. Maybe their case holds up without full cooperation. Maybe it doesn't. Either way, we face it together instead of betraying each other. How very noble, Diego said dryly. But I need more than sentiment. I need insurance. What kind of insurance? Diego pulled out his phone and showed Kingston something on the screen. Whatever it was made Kingston's face go rigid. "No," Kingston said. "Yes, those are my terms." "What's he showing you?" Nyla asked. Kingston didn't answer. Diego turned the phone so Nyla could see. It was a photograph of a property deed, a house in Boca Raton, Florida. "I don't understand," Nyla said. "That house belongs to Kingston's sister," Diego explained. "Emily, she's a school teacher, married with 2 kids, lives a completely clean life, knows nothing about her brother's business, but she makes excellent insurance." Nyla felt sick. "You're threatening his family." "I'm ensuring he honors our agreement. Kingston keeps his mouth shut, refuses to cooperate with the FBI, and my operations stay protected. In return, Emily and her family remain blissfully unaware of any danger." "You son of a—" Kingston started forward. Marcus grabbed him. "Don't. It's already done." "I'll kill you." "Tsa." "No, you won't. Because if anything happens to me, my people have instructions." Diego pocketed his phone. "This is business, Kingston. Nothing personal. But I'm not ending up in federal prison because your wife had a crisis of conscience." Diego walked toward the exit, then paused. "Oh, and Mrs. Beaumont? Thank you." "For what?" Nyla asked. "For proving that betrayal comes from the people closest to you. I'll remember that lesson." He left. The warehouse door clanged shut behind him. Kingston stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard. "I'll handle Diego," Victor said quietly. "We have leverage of our own. He won't touch Emily. He already has her address, photos of her kids." Kingston's voice cracked. "This is what I was trying to avoid. This is why I built the walls in the first place. To keep the people I love safe from my world." "Kingston." Nyla reached for him. He jerked away. "Don't. Just don't. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't protect my sister. Sorry doesn't undo the 6 months you spent destroying everything I built. I know, but I'm trying to make it right. By doing what? Recanting your testimony? That just makes us both criminals. That doesn't change the fact that you betrayed me." Kingston finally looked at her, and his eyes were empty. "You became exactly what I was afraid everyone would become. The person I trusted most. The person I let past all my defenses. You're the one who destroyed me." The words were worse than physical violence. "I love you," Nyla said, tears streaming down her face. "You have a funny way of showing it. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You spent 6 months building a federal case against your husband. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. It was a choice I'm trying to undo. You can't undo this." Kingston's voice rose. "My sister is in danger because of you. My people are facing prison because of you. Everything I've worked for is crumbling because of you. And you want me to, what, forgive you? Forget it? Pretend it didn't happen? I want you to understand why I did it." "I do understand. You were hurt, lonely, desperate. The FBI offered you a way out, and you took it. I get it." Kingston's voice dropped. "What I don't get is why you're still here. You got your freedom, your chance to escape. Why not take it?" "Because I don't want freedom without you." "Then you're a fool." The cruelty in his voice made Nyla flinch. Marcus cleared his throat. "We should go. FBI could be watching. No point giving them more evidence." "Good idea." Kingston moved toward the exit, then stopped. He didn't look at Nyla. "You should leave Atlanta, tonight. Disappear before the FBI comes for you. I'll tell them you fled, that I don't know where you are." "I'm not running." "Yes, you are. Because I can't protect you anymore. I can barely protect myself, so go. Start over somewhere. Live the life you wanted before I ruined it." "Kingston." "Go, Nyla, please. That's the only thing you can do for me now." He walked out. Marcus, Victor, and Antoine followed, leaving Nyla alone in the warehouse. She stood beneath the harsh fluorescent lights and felt the full weight of what she'd done. She'd betrayed the man she loved. She'd endangered his family. She'd destroyed an empire and accomplished nothing except ensuring they'd both go to prison. And now Kingston was telling her to run. Nyla walked out of the warehouse and got in her car. Her phone had 17 missed calls. The FBI, her lawyer, her sister. She ignored all of them and drove back to her apartment. Inside, she looked at the small space she'd built trying to escape Kingston's world. The books she'd bought, the plants she'd placed in windows, the life she'd constructed in rebellion against 7 years of loneliness. All of it meaningless now. She pulled out her laptop and started searching for flights. She had enough cash to disappear for a while. Could drive to a different city, buy a ticket with cash. Start over somewhere Kingston's enemies couldn't find her. That's what he'd asked her to do. Her finger hovered over the purchase button, then she closed the laptop. She wasn't running. Not this time. If Kingston was going to face the FBI, she was facing them too. If he was going to prison, she was going with him. And if Diego Navarro thought he could threaten Kingston's family with impunity, he was about to learn what a woman with nothing left to lose was capable of. Nyla pulled out her phone and made a call she should have made 6 months ago. "Michael Rothstein?" she said when Kingston's lawyer answered. "This is Nyla Beaumont. I need to hire you for something that has nothing to do with my husband." The next morning, FBI agents showed up at Kingston's estate at dawn. Kingston opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept. "Kingston Beaumont," Agent Morrison said, "you're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances." "I know." Kingston held out his wrists. They cuffed him, read him his rights, and led him to an unmarked sedan. As they drove away, Kingston looked back at the estate one last time. He'd built that house to be a fortress, a symbol of power, proof that he'd survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Now it just looked like an expensive prison he'd locked himself inside. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The FBI hadn't taken it yet. A text from Nyla. "I'm not running. Whatever happens, we face it together. I love you. I'm sorry. And I'm not giving up on us." Kingston stared at the message, then deleted it. Gomshit. Nyla stood outside Diego Navarro's restaurant in Buckhead, her heart hammering. She'd spent the entire night researching Diego, his operations, his weaknesses, his enemies, and she'd found something interesting, something the FBI didn't know, something even Kingston probably didn't know. Diego had a daughter at Emory University, pre-med, straight-A student, completely uninvolved in her father's business, just like Kingston's sister Emily. Nyla pushed open the restaurant door and walked inside. Diego was at his usual table in the back, eating breakfast and reading the newspaper. He looked up when she approached. "Mrs. Beaumont, this is unexpected. We need to talk. I'm busy. You're going to want to hear this." Something in her voice made him gesture to the chair across from him. "Sit. Talk fast." Nyla sat down. "You threatened Kingston's sister to keep him quiet. That was smart, effective. If you're here to beg for her safety, I'm here to offer you a trade." Diego set down his newspaper. "I'm listening." "I have information the FBI would love to have. Details about your operations in Miami, shipping routes, distribution networks, names of corrupt officials on your payroll." Nyla leaned forward. "Information that would put you in federal prison for the rest of your life." "You're bluffing." "Am I? I spent 6 months wearing a wire and gathering evidence against Kingston. You think I didn't pick up information about his associates, too?" Diego's expression hardened. "What do you want?" "You leave Emily alone. You honor your deal with Kingston, and you make sure none of your people move against his family. In return? In return, the evidence I have about your operations stays buried forever. Why would I believe you won't hand it to the FBI anyway? Because I'm going to prison. The evidence goes with me. But if anything happens to Kingston's family, if Emily or her kids so much as trip on a sidewalk, I'll make sure every agency in the federal government gets copies." Diego studied her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely." "You'd really trade your freedom for his sister's safety?" "I'd trade my life for it. His sister is all he has left that's good in this world. I'm not letting you take that from him." Diego leaned back in his chair. "You know what I think, Mrs. Beaumont? I think you're the most dangerous person Kingston Beaumont ever met. Not because you betrayed him, because you're willing to destroy yourself to protect him." "Do we have a deal?" Diego extended his hand across the table. "We have a deal. Emily stays safe. I honor my agreement with Kingston, and you keep whatever evidence you have about me locked away forever." Nyla shook his hand. "Forever." She stood to leave. "Mrs. Beaumont," Diego called after her. She turned. For what it's worth, I hope he forgives you. Because what you just did, that's love. Nyla walked out of the restaurant with her hands shaking and her heart racing. She'd just leveraged evidence she didn't actually have, bluffed one of the most dangerous men in the criminal underworld. Bet everything on Diego, believing she was capable of the same ruthlessness that had put her husband in FBI custody.
But Emily Beaumont and her children were safe. That was worth every risk. Nyla got in her car and drove to the federal courthouse, where Kingston was being processed. She walked into the lobby and found Michael Rothstein waiting. "They're arraigning him this afternoon," Michael said. "I've arranged for you to see him. 15 minutes, that's all they'll allow." "Thank you." Michael studied her. "Whatever you're planning, I hope it's not reckless." "Too late for that." He led her through security to a small room with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. Kingston sat at a metal table, wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed to a chain bolted to the floor. He looked up when she entered, and she saw exhaustion and pain and something that might have been hope before he shuddered it away. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I talked to Diego." Kingston went rigid. "What?" "I made a deal. Emily's safe. Her family's safe. Diego won't touch them." "How? What did you trade?" "Evidence about his operations. Things I supposedly picked up while wearing a wire for the FBI." "Nyla, if you actually have that evidence—" "I don't." She moved closer. "I bluffed. Told him I had enough to put him away for life and would hand it to the FBI if he hurt your family. He believed me." Kingston stared at her. "You're insane." "Probably, but your sister is safe. If Diego finds out you lied—" He won't, because I'm going to make sure I actually get that evidence, real evidence, enough to back up my bluff if it ever comes to it. Nyla sat down across from him. "I'm not running, Kingston. I'm not disappearing. I'm staying right here and fighting for us." "There is no us." "Yes, there is. We're married, for better or worse. And I know I caused the worst part, but I'm not giving up on the better." "Nyla, listen to me." She cut him off. "I made a terrible mistake. I betrayed you. I put people in danger. I destroyed everything you built. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. But I'm not doing it by running away. I'm doing it by standing beside you. In prison, if that's where we end up, and whatever comes next." Kingston's eyes were wet. "I don't know if I can forgive you." "I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive me today, or tomorrow, or even next year. I'm just asking you not to push me away. Let me fight for us. Let me prove I'm worth trusting again. I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't go through this again. I can't let someone in just to have them destroy me. Then don't let me in. Keep your walls up. Protect yourself." Nyla reached across the table, as close as she could get with his hands chained. "But let me stand outside those walls and prove I'm not going anywhere. Let me earn my way back. However long it takes." Kingston looked at her hand inches from his cuffed ones. "I told you to run," he said quietly. "I don't run from the people I love." "Even when they can't love you back?" "Especially then." The door opened. A guard stepped in. "Time's up." Nyla stood. "I'll be at the arraignment this afternoon, and every court date after that, and every day you're in prison if it comes to that. You're not alone, Kingston. Even if you hate me, even if you never forgive me, you're not alone." She walked out before he could respond. In the hallway, Michael was waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. "I don't know, but I said what I needed to say." "The arraignment is at 3 p.m. Prosecutor is pushing for no bail, flight risk, danger to the community, the usual. Will you get him bail?" "Doubtful, not with these charges." "Then I guess I'll be visiting him in federal detention." Michael put a hand on her shoulder. "You really love him, don't you? More than anything. Even after everything?" "Especially after everything, because I finally understand what he's been trying to tell me for months. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone even when they're broken, even when you're broken, even when everything's falling apart." "That's a hell of a lesson to learn the hard way." "Yeah," Nyla said. "It really is." Putz. The arraignment was exactly as brutal as expected. The prosecutor painted Kingston as a dangerous criminal who'd operated a sophisticated crime syndicate for over a decade. Flight risk. Community danger. menace to society. Michael argued for bail, citing Kingston's cooperation attempts, his ties to the community, his lack of violent criminal history. The judge wasn't buying it. Bail denied. Mr. Beaumont will remain in federal custody pending trial. Kingston showed no reaction. But when they led him out of the courtroom, he looked into the gallery, found Nyla sitting in the third row. Their eyes met for just a second. Then he was gone. Nyla sat in the courtroom long after everyone else had left. She'd destroyed her husband's empire. She'd put him in prison. She'd ruined both their lives. And yet, sitting in that empty courtroom, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. For 6 years, she'd existed on the periphery of Kingston's world. An ornament, a symbol, someone who attended events and smiled for cameras and slowly disappeared. Now, finally, she had something to fight for. Not an empire, not wealth or power or status. Her marriage. The actual human connection buried beneath all the lies and betrayals and protective walls. Neela stood up and walked out of the courthouse into brilliant afternoon sun. Her phone rang. Unknown number.
Mrs. Beaumont? A woman's voice. Professional? Familiar. This is she. This is Agent Morrison. I wanted to inform you that we're filing charges against you as well. Obstruction of justice, conspiracy, perjury. You need to turn yourself in by Monday morning. I understand. Mrs. Beaumont, Morrison's voice softened slightly. This didn't have to happen. You could have testified, could have protected yourself. I know. Then why didn't you?
Nyla looked back on the courthouse where Kingston was being held. Because some things are worth going to prison for, she said. Like what? Like proving to the person you love that you're capable of change, that you're capable of sacrifice, that you meant it when you said, for better or worse. Morrison was quiet for a moment. See you Monday, Mrs. Beaumont. After hanging up, Nyla got in her car and sat for a while, processing what came next. Monday, she'd turn herself in. She'd be arraigned, probably denied bail too. She'd go to federal prison, and somewhere in that same system, Kingston would be locked up, hating her, unable to forgive her, but at least knowing she hadn't abandoned him. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined, but maybe it was the one they needed. Nyla started her car and drove back to her apartment. She had a weekend to get her affairs in order, to prepare for whatever came next, and to figure out how to survive prison while fighting for a marriage that might already be dead. Kingston lay on a concrete bunk in federal detention and stared at the ceiling. 2 days ago, he'd been a powerful crime lord with an empire spanning continents. Now he was inmate 847392, wearing an orange jumpsuit, eating food that tasted like cardboard, and sharing a cell with a guy awaiting trial for tax fraud. The fall had been swift and absolute. But the worst part wasn't the cell or the food or the loss of freedom. The worst part was replaying every conversation with Nyla, every coffee date where she'd seemed so genuine, every therapy session where they'd slowly rebuilt trust, every moment where he'd let his guard down, believing she'd changed. She'd been wearing a wire the entire time, except Michael said she'd stopped after the first month, that she'd tried to pull out of the FBI cooperation, that she'd fought them. Kingston didn't know what to believe anymore. His cellmate, whose name was Russell, and who talked too much, cleared his throat. You're Kingston Beaumont, right? The one all over the news? Yeah. Damn, that's heavy. Your wife really set you up? Something like that. And now she's going to prison too? Talk about a wild marriage. Kingston said nothing. You gonna divorce her? Russell asked. The question hit harder than it should have. Kingston had spent 2 days not thinking about the answer, because thinking about it meant facing truths he wasn't ready to face. Did he want to divorce Nyla? Did he want to cut her out completely? Or was there some part of him, some stubborn, broken part, that still loved her despite everything? I don't know, Kingston admitted. Man, that's a tough one. On one hand, she betrayed you. On the other hand, she threw away her freedom to protect you. That's love, right? Twisted, complicated love, but still. Or stupidity. Maybe both. Russell shrugged. But here's what I think. People make mistakes, big ones, and either you forgive them or you don't. Either way, you gotta decide who you want to be on the other side of this. I want to be free. Nah. I mean, who you want to be as a person. The guy who let one betrayal turn him into an island, or the guy who found a way to forgive.
Kingston rolled over, facing the wall. I don't know if I can forgive her. Then you got time to figure it out. We're all stuck here anyway. Alone in his bunk, Kingston thought about Nyla standing in that visiting room, telling him she wasn't running, promising to stand beside him no matter what. He thought about her making a deal with Diego, bluffing with evidence she didn't have, risking her life to protect his sister. And he thought about the journal she'd found, the entries that proved he'd spent 15 years building walls that eventually trapped him. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what she'd done. Maybe it was about understanding why she'd done it, and whether the woman she was now was worth fighting for. Kingston closed his eyes and tried to sleep. In 3 weeks, they'd both be facing federal trials. In 3 weeks, they'd learn whether they'd spend the next decade in prison. In 3 weeks, he'd have to decide if his marriage was worth saving. But tonight, alone in a cell, all he could think about was the look on Nyla's face when she'd said she loved him, and wonder if love was ever enough to survive betrayal, or if some wounds cut too deep to ever truly heal. 3 weeks in federal detention taught Kingston Beaumont more about himself than 15 years of running an empire ever had. He learned that power meant nothing when you couldn't walk outside, that wealth was irrelevant when every day looked identical, that control was an illusion you maintained until someone stripped it away and left you with nothing but time to think. And Kingston thought about everything. He thought about Marcus Reeves betraying him 15 years ago, about the walls he'd built so high he'd forgotten what sunlight felt like, about Nyla sitting across from him at coffee shops trying to rebuild something he'd spent years destroying. He thought about the journal she'd found, the entries that proved he'd chosen survival over humanity and called it strength. Mostly he thought about the look on her face in that visiting room, the desperation, the hope, the absolute certainty that their marriage was worth fighting for even when he couldn't see it himself. His lawyer visited twice a week with case updates. The prosecution's evidence was strong but not insurmountable. Without Nyla's testimony and Kingston's cooperation, they had recordings that could be challenged, documents that required context, and witnesses who could be discredited. Michael was cautiously optimistic about avoiding a life sentence, but optimism felt foreign to Kingston now. On a Thursday morning 3 weeks into detention, a guard came to his cell. "You have a visitor." Kingston assumed it was Michael. Another strategy session, another discussion of plea deals and sentencing guidelines. Instead, when he walked into the visiting room, Emily sat at the metal table, his sister, who he hadn't seen in 6 months, who knew nothing about his real business, who lived a clean, normal life teaching high school chemistry and raising 2 kids. Emily looked older than he remembered, or maybe he'd just forgotten what normal aging looked like when you weren't drowning in stress and violence. "Hi," she said when he sat down across from her. "You shouldn't be here." "Probably not, but I wanted to see you." Emily's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "I wanted to understand what happened. Nothing happened. I made bad choices. Now I'm paying for them." "Don't do that. Don't shut me out like you shut out everyone else." She leaned forward. "Kingston, I'm your sister. I know you. And I know you didn't end up here by accident." Kingston looked at his hands, cuffed and chained to the table. "I built an empire on illegal operations. The FBI caught up with me. That's the whole story. That's the facts. I'm asking about the why. Why what? Why you became this person, why you pushed everyone away, why you destroyed your marriage to a woman I know you loved." Emily's voice cracked. "Mom and Dad raised us better than this." The mention of their parents hit like a gut punch. "Dad's business partner tried to kill me after he died," Kingston said quietly. "I killed him first. Everything after that was just trying to survive. By building a criminal empire, by making sure no one could ever hurt me again." "And how did that work out?" Kingston almost laughed. "About as well as you'd expect." Emily reached across the table as far as the regulations allowed. "I got a call last week. Anonymous. Someone telling me to be careful, that I was being watched, that my kids were in danger." Kingston's blood went cold. "Who called?" "I don't know. But then 2 days later, another call. Different person, telling me the danger was over, that I was safe." Emily studied his face. "That was Nyla, wasn't it? She did something to protect us." "Yes." "What did she do?"
Made a deal with a very dangerous man. Put herself at risk to keep you safe. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She's in prison too, isn't she? She turned herself in Monday. Obstruction of justice, perjury. Same facility as me, different wing. Have you talked to her? No. Why not? Because she betrayed me. Spent 6 months gathering evidence to destroy everything I built. So you're just going to let her sit in prison alone after she protected your family? It's complicated.
It's not complicated, it's fear. Emily's voice was sharp. You're afraid to forgive her because forgiving her means admitting you still love her. And love means vulnerability. And vulnerability is what got you hurt the first time. You don't understand. I understand that you've spent 15 years punishing everyone in your life for one man's betrayal. And now the woman who actually loves you made a mistake, tried to fix it, and is sitting in a cell because she refused to save herself if it meant losing you. Emily wiped her eyes. She did more to protect this family than you have in years, Kingston. Maybe it's time you stopped hiding and started fighting for something that actually matters.
After Emily left, Kingston sat in the visiting room long after he should have returned to his cell. A guard finally came to get him. Let's go, Beaumont. Can you check if Nyla Beaumont is available for a visit? Kingston asked. The guard raised an eyebrow. Your wife? Yes? She's in the women's facility. Different building. I can put in a request, but it'll take a few days to process. Do it, Juan. Nyla had been in federal detention for 2 weeks and learned that prison was exactly as terrible as she'd imagined. The cell was 8 by 10 feet. The food was inedible. The other inmates ranged from white-collar embezzlers to women who'd killed their abusive husbands. Everyone had a story. Everyone was trapped. Nyla spent her days reading legal documents Michael sent her, preparing for a trial she knew she'd lose. The prosecution had her dead to rights on obstruction. She'd recanted sworn testimony, destroyed an immunity deal, made herself an accomplice to crimes she'd originally been cooperating to expose. There was no winning this. But sitting in her cell at night, listening to the sounds of women crying or arguing or just trying to survive, Nyla didn't regret her choice. She'd spent 7 years living a half-life inside Kingston's empire. Then 6 months living a lie while gathering evidence. Finally, she'd made one honest choice. Stand by her husband, even if he never forgave her, even if she spent the next decade in prison. At least it was honest. On Thursday afternoon, a guard came to her cell. You have a visitor request. From who? Kingston Beaumont. Your husband. Nyla's heart stopped. When? Tomorrow, 2 p.m. You want to accept?
Did she want to? The thought of seeing Kingston terrified her. What if he only wanted to finalize their divorce? What if he'd come to tell her in person that he'd never forgive her? Yes, Nyla said. I'll see him. That night she barely slept. Rehearsed 100 conversations in her head. Apologies, explanations, pleas for understanding. But when she walked into the visiting room the next day and saw Kingston sitting at the metal table in his orange jumpsuit, every prepared word evaporated. He looked thinner, exhausted, like prison was eating him alive. But his eyes, when they met hers, weren't empty anymore. Hi, she said, sitting down across from him. Hi. They sat in silence for a moment. The visiting room buzzed with other inmates and their families, creating a strange soundtrack of grief and hope. Finally, Kingston spoke. Emily visited me yesterday. Is she okay? She's fine. Thanks to you. He looked at his chained hands. She told me you protected her, made a deal with Diego. I did what I had to do. You risked your life. Your sister and her kids are innocent. They didn't deserve to be pulled into this mess. Neither did you. Nyla felt tears prick her eyes. Kingston, let me finish. He took a breath. I've spent 3 weeks in here thinking about everything. About Marcus's betrayal, about the walls I built, about our marriage. He finally looked at her. About what you did and why you did it. I'm so sorry. I know, and I've been trying to figure out if sorry is enough. If I can forgive you. If we can survive this. And? Her voice barely worked. And I don't know. I'm still angry, still hurt, still fighting every instinct that tells me loving you means getting destroyed again. Kingston's voice dropped. But Emily's right. I've spent 15 years punishing everyone for one man's actions, including you, especially you. You had every right to shut down after what Marcus did. Maybe. But shutting down meant shutting you out. And shutting you out pushed you into the FBI's arms. He leaned forward as far as his chains allowed. You made a terrible choice. But I made the choice that created the conditions for you to make it. Nyla shook her head. You can't blame yourself for my betrayal. I'm not. I'm acknowledging that marriages don't fall apart from one mistake. They fall apart from 1,000 small abandonments. Kingston's eyes were wet. I abandoned you for 6 years. You betrayed me for 6 months. Both of us broke something that matters. So what do we do? I don't know yet, but I know I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating you. And I know that sitting in that cell, the only thing that made any sense was the thought of you doing the same thing in yours. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. Not today. Maybe not for months. But eventually, I want to figure out if we can build something real from all this wreckage. He looked at her steadily. If you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to do anything. Then we start here, in these cells, facing the consequences of our choices. And we see if there's anything left worth saving when we get out. Nyla reached across the table, stopping just short of touching his chained hands. I love you. I know. And somewhere underneath all this anger and pain, I still love you too. Kingston's voice cracked. That's what makes this so hard. If I didn't love you, forgiveness would be easy. I'd just walk away. But I can't walk away from you, Nyla, even when I want to. Is that a curse or a blessing? Both. They sat there, 2 people in orange jumpsuits separated by a metal table in a gulf of hurt, trying to figure out if love could survive betrayal. The guard announced 5 minutes remaining. Michael thinks we both have a chance at reduced sentences, Kingston said. If we're lucky, 3 to 5 years instead of 20. That's a long time. Yeah, but it's not forever. Will you wait for me? Nyla asked. Or should I let you go now so you can move on? Kingston was quiet for a long moment. I waited 6 years for you to become invisible. I think I can wait 5 years for you to become real again. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. And hope was more than Nyla had allowed herself to feel in weeks. The guard announced time was up. They both stood. Neither wanted to leave. Can I visit again? Kingston asked. Please. Once a week. We'll talk. Work through this. See if we can find our way back. Okay? As the guards led them to separate doors, Nyla looked back one more time. Kingston was watching her too. And for the first time since everything fell apart, she believed they might actually survive this. The trial proceedings took 6 months. Both Kingston and Nyla faced federal judges who showed little sympathy for criminals, even ones who tried to undo their crimes. Kingston's trial went first. The prosecution laid out 15 years of illegal operations in exhaustive detail: money laundering, racketeering, drug distribution, a vast criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for over a decade. Michael argued that Kingston had attempted cooperation, that he'd tried to dismantle his empire, that he'd shown remorse. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 5. Kingston showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Just looked into the gallery where Nyla sat in her own orange jumpsuit, escorted by guards for the sentencing. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." He mouthed back, "I know." 2 weeks later, Nyla faced her own trial. The evidence against her was ironclad. She'd recanted sworn testimony, obstructed a federal investigation, lied to FBI agents. Michael argued emotional duress, a woman trapped in an abusive power dynamic who'd made desperate choices and then tried to undo them. The prosecution argued she'd had every opportunity to do the right thing and had consistently chosen crime. The jury took less than a day. Guilty. 6 years with parole eligibility after 4. When the sentence came down, Nyla felt something like relief. She'd expected worse, and now she knew 4 years minimum, possibly 6, but a timeline, an endpoint, a chance to rebuild when she got out. After sentencing, they were both transferred to permanent facilities. Kingston to a medium-security federal prison in Ohio, Nyla to a women's facility in Kentucky,
300 miles apart, but connected by weekly phone calls and monthly letters and the stubborn refusal to give up on something neither of them fully understood anymore. Bertarkit. Year 1 was brutal. Prison routines were dehumanizing by design. Wake at 6, count, breakfast, work assignment, lunch, recreation, dinner, count, lockdown. Every day identical. Every day a test of whether you remembered who you'd been before the orange jumpsuit. Kingston worked in the prison library, cataloging books and helping other inmates with legal research. Found a strange peace in the quiet work, in being useful without the weight of an empire. He went to therapy. Real therapy, facilitated by a prison psychologist who didn't let him hide behind defenses or deflections. Unpacked the Marcus betrayal, the childhood trauma of losing his father, the toxic masculinity that equated emotions with weakness. It was excruciating. It was necessary. And slowly, painfully, Kingston started becoming someone he didn't recognize. Someone who could feel things without immediately building walls. Someone who could be vulnerable without feeling like he was dying. Nyla's experience mirrored his in different ways. She worked in the prison kitchen, waking at 4 a.m. to help prepare meals for 800 women. The work was exhausting and mindless, which gave her too much time to think. She went to therapy too. Processed the 7 years of emotional neglect, the desperate choice to betray Kingston, the 6 months of lying to everyone, including herself. Her therapist asked hard questions. Why had she stayed so long in a marriage that made her invisible? Why had she believed betraying Kingston would free her when it only trapped them both? Nyla didn't have good answers, but she started finding them in the work, in the daily routine, in the letters she wrote to Kingston every week. They wrote about everything. The small details of prison life, the breakthroughs in therapy, the fears and hopes and slow transformation happening inside concrete walls. Kingston's letters started formal, distant, careful. Then gradually, they softened. I'm learning that anger is easier than grief. I've been angry at you for months because it was safer than admitting how much losing you hurt. But my therapist says anger is just pain wearing armor. And I'm tired of the armor. Neela's letters were raw from the start. I destroyed us because I was too afraid to leave honestly. Easier to let the FBI do it for me. Easier to be the victim of your neglect than admit I'd stayed too long in something that was killing me. I'm sorry doesn't fix that. But I'm working on fixing myself. Becoming someone brave enough to leave or stay for real reasons instead of fear. Their phone calls happened every Sunday, 15 minutes, monitored, formal. But those 15 minutes became the center of both their weeks. How are you? Became real questions instead of pleasantries. I'm struggling became acceptable answers instead of deflection. And slowly, across phone lines and prison walls, they started rebuilding something that looked like honesty. Year 2. Kingston's sister Emily visited regularly. She brought photos of her kids, updates about her teaching job, stories about normal life outside concrete and barbed wire. They're doing well in school, she said during one visit, showing Kingston pictures of his niece and nephew. Sarah made honor roll. Michael joined the debate team. They're growing up, Kingston said quietly. They ask about you, want to know when you're coming home. What do you tell them? The truth. That you made mistakes and you're paying for them. That everyone deserves a second chance. Emily tucked the photos away. How are things with Nyla? Better. We talk every week. Write letters. It's strange. We're getting to know each other again. Really know each other. Without all the noise of the empire. That's good. Is it? We're both in prison. Both facing years away from any kind of normal life. What future do we have? Emily smiled. The same future everyone has. The one you build when this is over. If you want it badly enough. I don't know if I do. Yes, you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be working this hard to fix yourself. Kingston thought about that after Emily left. Was he fixing himself for Nyla or for himself? He called Nyla that Sunday and asked her the same question. Does it matter? She said. Either way, you're doing the work. Either way, you're becoming someone better. But if we don't end up together, then we don't. But at least we'll both be whole people who can build real lives. Together or apart? Neela paused. Kingston, I'm not fixing myself to win you back. I'm fixing myself because I need to. Because I can't be that desperate, invisible woman anymore. If we end up together after this, It'll be because we choose each other, not because we need each other to feel whole. When did you get so wise? Prison therapy. It's surprisingly effective when you can't run away from it. Year 2, Nyla started taking college courses through a prison education program. Business management, psychology. Things she'd always wanted to study but never had time for when she was organizing charity galas. She found she was good at it, loved the learning, loved having an identity beyond criminal's wife or federal inmate. She still wrote to Kingston every week, still called every Sunday. But the desperation faded. She loved him, wanted him, hoped they'd rebuild their marriage. But she didn't need him to survive anymore, and that changed everything. Year 3, Kingston came up for his first parole hearing. Michael prepared him extensively. What to say, how to show remorse, why the board should grant early release. Kingston sat before 5 stone-faced parole board members and answered their questions honestly. Do you take responsibility for your crimes? Yes. I built a criminal empire knowing it was wrong. I made choices that hurt people, and I'm paying the consequences. What have you done to rehabilitate yourself? I've been in therapy for 3 years. I work in the prison library helping other inmates. I've taken courses in conflict resolution and emotional intelligence. I've written letters to the families of people hurt by my operations, apologizing even though sorry doesn't undo harm. If released, what would you do? I'd rebuild my relationship with my family, try to repair my marriage if my wife will have me, find legitimate work, contribute to society instead of destroying it. The board deliberated for 2 weeks. Parole denied. The reason? Insufficient demonstration of lasting change. They wanted to see more evidence of rehabilitation. Kingston called Nyla that Sunday with the news. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. They're probably right. I've done the work, but I haven't lived it yet. Haven't proved I can function in the real world without defaulting to old patterns. So what now? Now I keep working, keep growing, try again next year. He paused. How are you doing? Good. I finished my associate degree, applying for a bachelor's program. That's amazing. Yeah, it turns out I'm actually smart when I'm not spending all my energy trying to be invisible. Kingston smiled. I always knew you were smart. No, you didn't. You knew I was competent at organizing events. You never knew I was smart because you never asked what I thought about anything real. The words could have been an accusation. Instead, they were just honest. You're right, Kingston said. I'm sorry. I know, and I forgive you. It was the first time either of them had said those words. Kingston felt something crack open in his chest. Do you mean that? He asked. Yes. You neglected me, shut me out, made me feel worthless, and I forgive you for all of it. Why? Because holding on to resentment was killing me. Because forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me. And because I've seen you work harder to change yourself than I've ever seen anyone work at anything. I don't know if I've forgiven you yet, Kingston admitted. I know, and that's okay. Forgiveness isn't a race. After hanging up, Kingston sat in the prison common area and realized something fundamental had shifted. For 3 years, he'd been working to fix himself so he could deserve Nyla. But that was the wrong motivation. He needed to fix himself because being broken was no way to live, regardless of whether they ended up together. And once he understood that, the work became easier. Year 4, Nyla came up for her own parole hearing. She'd completed her degree, had spotless conduct reviews, volunteered as a peer counselor helping other inmates cope with prison life. The parole board asked similar questions. Why should we release you early? Because I've done everything I can to become someone who won't reoffend. I have a degree, job prospects, a support system. I've completed every available rehabilitation program, and I understand now why I made the choices that brought me here. Those choices involved betraying your husband to federal authorities. Yes, I was desperate and angry, and the FBI offered me a way out. It was wrong, I know that, and I spent the past 4 years learning how to make better choices. What will you do if released? I'll find work in business management or counseling. I'll continue therapy, and I'll try to rebuild my marriage if that's something we both want. Your husband is still incarcerated. I know. If released, I'll wait for him, support him, be the partner I should have been from the beginning. The board deliberated for 3 weeks. Parole granted. Conditional release. Halfway house for 6 months. Regular check-ins with a parole officer. Any violations mean immediate return to prison. But freedom. When Nyla got the news, she called Kingston immediately on her weekly phone call. They granted it, she said, her voice shaking. When? 3 weeks. I'll be out in 3 weeks. Silence on the other end. Kingston? I'm happy for you. Really, you deserve this. But you're going to be out there living your life while I'm still in here, and I don't want you to waste years waiting for me. I'm not wasting anything. I'm building a life, and when you get out, you'll be part of it, if you want to be. Nyla, I love you. I've loved you through everything, the neglect, the betrayal, the prison time. I'm not stopping now. What if I'm not the same person when I get out? Good. I don't want the same person. I want whoever you're becoming. After the call, Kingston sat in his cell and felt the full weight of what was happening. Nyla was getting out, moving forward, building a real life, and he was happy for her. Terrified but happy. No. Nyla's release day came on a cold October morning. She walked out of the federal facility in Kentucky wearing donated clothes and carrying a small bag of personal belongings. Emily was waiting in the parking lot, her car running. Welcome back, Emily said, hugging her tight. It doesn't feel real yet. It will. Come on, we have a lot to do. Emily drove Nyla to the halfway house in Cincinnati, where she'd spend the next 6 months. A nondescript building in a residential neighborhood, shared with 15 other women transitioning from prison to society. The rules were strict. Curfew at 10 p.m. Mandatory job search. Weekly drug tests. No alcohol. No contact with known criminals. Nyla signed all the paperwork and moved into a small room with 2 twin beds and a shared bathroom. It was paradise compared to prison. That first night, she called Kingston from the halfway house payphone. I'm out, she said. How does it feel? Scary. Everything's too bright, too loud, too much. It'll get easier. I know. She paused. I miss you. I miss you too. Your parole hearing is in 4 months. Yeah. They'll grant it this time. I know they will. Maybe. Kingston, I'm building a life for us. Finding work. Getting stable. When you get out, you'll have something to come home to. What if I'm not who you want anymore when I'm out? Then we'll figure it out together. But stop assuming the worst. We've survived worse than this. He laughed quietly. Yeah, we really have. Nyla spent her first weeks out applying for jobs. Her criminal record made everything harder, but eventually a small interior design firm agreed to hire her as an assistant, entry-level work, barely above minimum wage. She took it gratefully. The work was good, challenging, creative, nothing like organizing charity galas for criminals. She found an apartment she could afford once the halfway house period ended, started building a life that was actually hers, and every Sunday she called Kingston and told him about it. I painted the living room, soft gray. You'd hate it. I probably would. There's a coffee shop downstairs that makes terrible lattes, so naturally you go there every day. Every morning, it's part of the routine. I'm proud of you, Kingston said, building all this. Build it with me when you get out. If I get out. When? Geese. 4 months later, Kingston faced his second parole hearing. This time he had 4 years of documented rehabilitation. Therapy records. Educational achievements. Work performance reviews. Letters from Emily, from Michael, from other inmates he'd helped, and a letter from Nyla. To the parole board. My name is Nyla Beaumont, and I'm writing to support my husband's application for early release. I know what it means for a wife to write these letters. You've probably seen hundreds like this from women standing by their criminal husbands. But this is different. Kingston isn't the man who went into prison 4 years ago. He's someone who's done the hardest work possible, looking at his broken pieces and figuring out how to build something better. I've watched him transform through letters and phone calls, watched him choose vulnerability over violence, honesty over control, growth over comfort. He made terrible choices that hurt people, but he spent 4 years becoming someone who won't make those choices again. Please give him the chance to prove it in the real world. Respectfully, Nyla Beaumont. Kingston sat before the parole board and answered their questions with the same honesty he'd brought 4 years earlier, but this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't performing rehabilitation. He'd actually lived it.
The board deliberated for 10 days. Then Michael called with the news. They granted it, conditional release, 6 months supervised probation. Any violations mean immediate return. But Kingston, you're getting out. Kingston sat in his cell and felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Real hope. The kind that didn't hurt. He called Nyla immediately. "I'm coming home," he said. She started crying. "When?" "2 weeks." "I'll be there. I'll be at the gate when you walk out." Nyla, don't tell me not to come. I'm coming. Kingston smiled. "Okay. Come." His release day was cold and bright. Kingston walked out of the federal facility in Ohio carrying his personal belongings in a box, wearing clothes Emily had sent. And there, waiting by the gate, was Nyla. She looked different, older, stronger, more real than he'd ever seen her. Kingston walked toward her, his heart hammering. They stopped a few feet apart, neither knowing what to do. "Hi," Nyla said. "Hi." Then she closed the distance and hugged him. Not the desperate, frantic hug of prison visits. A real hug. Solid. Grounding. Kingston wrapped his arms around her and felt 4 years of walls finally come down. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "For everything. For shutting you out. For choosing the empire over you. For making you so lonely you felt like betrayal was the only option. I'm sorry too. For wearing a wire. For lying. For almost destroying everything." They stood there in the prison parking lot. 2 people who'd broken each other and somehow survived. "So what now?" Kingston asked, pulling back to look at her. "Now we go home. The apartment I rented, it's small, barely furnished, nothing like the estate." "Sounds perfect." "And tomorrow, you start looking for work, something legitimate, something that doesn't require walls or violence or shutting down. Any suggestions? I hear the library system is hiring." Kingston smiled. "I'd be good at that." They got in Nyla's car, a beat-up Honda she'd bought with her design work savings, and drove away from the prison. As Ohio rolled past the windows, Kingston looked at his wife and asked the question he'd been afraid to ask for 4 years. "Do you think we can actually make this work? Build something real?" Nyla reached over and took his hand. "I think we already have. We survived betrayal, prison, 4 years apart. If we can survive that, we can survive anything. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having is. I'm not the same person I was. Neither am I. That's the point." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kingston said quietly, "I forgive you." Nyla's eyes filled with tears. "You mean that?" "Yes. You made a terrible choice, but I understand why, and I'm tired of holding on to anger. It's heavy. I'm done carrying it. Thank you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to let go. For doing the work even when it hurt. For becoming someone I can build a real life with." Kingston squeezed her hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us. For standing by me even when I pushed you away. For loving me when I was unlovable. You were never unlovable, just unreachable. And now? Now you're right here. Finally." They pulled up outside a small apartment building in Cincinnati. 3 stories. Brick facade. Nothing remarkable. "This is home," Nyla said. Kingston looked at the building, then at his wife. "Then let's go home." They walked inside together, up 3 flights of stairs to a tiny apartment with gray walls and terrible coffee downstairs and none of the luxury they'd once known. It was perfect. That first night, they sat on the couch Nyla had bought from Goodwill, drinking cheap wine and talking about everything. "What do you want our future to look like?" Nyla asked. "Honest. I want conversations that matter. I want to actually know you, what you think, what you dream about, what scares you. No more silence, no more walls." "I want that too, and I want my own life, my own career, my own identity, outside of being your wife." "You should have that. You deserve that. And I want kids someday, if you want them too." Kingston looked surprised. "We've never talked about that. We've never talked about a lot of things, but we have time now, years and years to figure out what we want." "Kids sound terrifying." "They are, but also good." "Okay then, someday, when we're stable, when we've rebuilt enough trust, Someday we'll have kids. Nyla smiled. Someday.
They finished the wine and fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, finally in the same space after 4 years apart. It wasn't perfect. Kingston woke up twice from nightmares. Nyla cried in the morning over nothing and everything. But they were together, and they were trying. The next 6 months were hard. Kingston struggled with re-entry. The supervised probation felt suffocating. Finding work with a federal conviction was nearly impossible. He eventually found a job at a used bookstore, shelving inventory and helping customers. It paid almost nothing. But it was honest work, legal work that didn't require violence or moral compromise. Nyla's interior design business slowly grew. She took on small residential projects, gradually building a reputation. The pay was inconsistent but meaningful. They lived on tight budgets, ate cheap food, wore secondhand clothes. It was nothing like the life they'd had before. It was better, because it was real. They went to couples therapy every week, unpacked the years of damage, learned how to communicate without shutting down, practiced vulnerability even when it felt like dying. Some sessions were brutal, arguments that made them question if they'd survive, confessions that hurt worse than anything prison had thrown at them. But they showed up, every week, did the work, and slowly, painfully, they rebuilt trust. Kingston learned to ask about Nyla's day and actually listen to the answer, learned to express fear without turning it into anger, learned that loving someone meant letting them see your broken pieces. Nyla learned to speak up when she felt invisible instead of disappearing, learned to trust that Kingston wouldn't shut her out, learned that marriage wasn't about perfection, it was about choosing each other through the imperfect. 6 months after Kingston's release, they took a walk through a park in Cincinnati. It was a Sunday morning, unseasonably warm, families playing, dogs running, normal life unfolding around them. "You know what's strange?" Kingston said. "I don't miss it." "Miss what?" "The empire, the power, the money, all of it." He looked at her. "I thought losing it would destroy me, but I'm happier now than I've been in 15 years. "Why?" "Because I'm not carrying it anymore. The weight of maintaining control, the paranoia, the constant vigilance. I'm just a guy working in a bookstore, married to a woman I love, living a simple life." "You're okay with simple?" "Simple is harder than an empire. Simple requires showing up every day without the armor, trusting people without guarantees, being vulnerable without safety nets." Kingston stopped walking and turned to face her. "But yeah, I'm okay with simple, as long as it's with you." Nyla kissed him, right there in the park with families watching. Kissed him like they were teenagers instead of 2 ex-convicts building a life from rubble. When they pulled apart, she said, "I love you, the real you. Not the crime lord, not the empire builder, just you. I love you too, the real you. The one who's brave and smart and didn't give up on us even when I gave you every reason to." They walked home hand in hand. Inside their small apartment, Kingston made coffee while Nyla set up her laptop to work on a design proposal. It was ordinary, mundane, nothing like the life they'd once led. It was everything, because they'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that love isn't about grand gestures or luxury or power. It's about showing up, day after day, choosing each other when it's hard, building trust slowly instead of expecting it immediately. It's about forgiveness, real forgiveness, the kind that acknowledges hurt but refuses to be defined by it. And most of all, it's about becoming whole people separately so you can choose to be together. Kingston had spent 15 years building walls to protect himself from betrayal. Nyla had spent 7 years disappearing to avoid confronting her own needs. Both of them had destroyed their marriage through fear and avoidance and self-preservation. But in the ruins, they'd found something stronger than what they'd lost. They'd found each other. Actually found each other. Not the fantasy versions they'd tried to love. The real versions. Broken and healing and imperfect. And that, finally, was enough. 2 years later, Kingston and Nyla stood in a small garden behind a community center in Cincinnati. They'd been out of prison for 2 years, married for 11 years total, and today they were renewing their vows, not because they needed to, because they wanted to. The ceremony was small. Emily and her family, Michael Rothstein,
Simone and Marcus, who'd served 18 months and were rebuilding their own marriage. A handful of friends from work and therapy.
No cameras. No performance. Just people who'd witnessed their journey. The officiant, a friend from their couples therapy group, smiled at them. Kingston and Nyla, you've asked me here today not to start your marriage, but to acknowledge what you've rebuilt, to honor the hard work you've done, to celebrate surviving what should have destroyed you. Kingston held Nyla's hands and looked into her eyes. 7 years ago, I married you without knowing how to be a husband. I gave you luxury, but not love. Security, but not safety. I built walls so high you suffocated inside them. His voice steadied. And when you broke, I blamed you instead of seeing my part in it. But you didn't give up. You fought. You made mistakes fighting, but you fought. And you taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other in the mess. Nyla's eyes were wet. 7 years ago, I married you thinking love would be enough. That if I stayed quiet and invisible, eventually you'd see me. I was wrong. Love isn't enough without honesty, without standing up for what you need even when it's hard. She squeezed his hands. I betrayed you, almost destroyed us. But you forgave me. Actually forgave me. And you taught me that people can change, that prison doesn't have to be the end, that broken things can be stronger when they heal. They exchanged new rings, not the expensive ones from their first wedding, simple silver bands they'd bought together at a local jeweler. The officiant pronounced them married. Again. Kingston kissed his wife, really kissed her, with all the passion and pain and hard-won trust of 11 years together. The small group applauded. After the ceremony, they had cake and cheap champagne in the community center. Emily pulled Nyla aside. You look happy. I am. Really happy.
Good. You both deserve it. Emily smiled. Kingston told me you're thinking about starting a family. Nyla nodded. We're trying. No luck yet, but we're hopeful. You'll be amazing parents, both of you. I hope so. We've certainly learned enough about what not to do. Emily laughed. That's most of parenting anyway. Across the room, Kingston stood with Marcus and Michael, drinking champagne and laughing at something. He looked relaxed, open, alive in a way Nyla had never seen during their first marriage. This was who he'd been meant to be all along, not a crime lord, not an empire builder, just a man learning how to love honestly. As evening settled over Cincinnati, the small group filtered out until only Kingston and Nyla remained. They sat on the community center steps watching sunset paint the sky orange and pink. We made it, Nyla said softly. Yeah, we really did. Do you ever regret how we got here? The prison time. The pain. Kingston thought about it. I regret hurting you, regret the years we lost, but I don't regret what we learned. We had to fall apart to figure out how to be together. That's a really expensive lesson. The best ones usually are. Nyla leaned against him. So what now? We've rebuilt our marriage, found stable work, made it through probation. What's next? Next, we just live. Wake up every day and choose each other. Raise kids someday. Grow old. Be boring. Boring sounds amazing, doesn't it? They sat together as darkness fell. Two people who'd survived betrayal in prison and their own worst instincts. They'd learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. That forgiveness wasn't forgetting. It was choosing to move forward anyway. That marriage wasn't a destination. It was work you did every single day. And most importantly, they'd learned that breaking wasn't the end. Sometimes breaking was the beginning of becoming whole. Kingston Beaumont had spent 15 years building a fortress that became his prison. Nyla Beaumont had spent 7 years disappearing inside someone else's life. Together, they'd destroyed everything they thought they needed and built something infinitely better from the ruins. A real life, an honest marriage, a future worth fighting for. In the end, that was the only empire worth building, the one made of trust, vulnerability, and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. Even when giving up would have been easier, even when the cost was everything they owned, even when the world said they'd never survive, they'd proven the world wrong, and they'd done it together. Finally, truly, together.